Welcome back to the HLG Show, episode number 2, Life in the Fast Lane. This episode, we're going to be talking about growing over 1,000 micromoles. 1,000 micromoles is what everybody thinks they want, thinks they need, but not everybody can handle it. Or maybe they can. I don't know. We've got a special guest with us, Wolverine from WolverineGrown. You can follow him on Instagram. And as always, Stephen Johnson, CEO of Horticultural Lighting Group. What's up, guys?
How we doing?
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Good. Well, we'll just get right into it, guys. I know we said we are going to do a show about every 2 weeks or so, but, you know, obviously Christmas happened and stuff like that. So we didn't build this studio to do an episode once a month, right? So we're back from the holidays. I had a 2-week vacation. I went down to Houston and, I think I might have taken a day to go to MJ BizCon in Vegas. I took 2 days off there, but it's my first vacation in a year, you know,
Nice.
and I'm running a facility every single day. Maybe 44 hours a week, something like that. Not crazy or whatever, but I mean, hell, you were running. Let's talk about your business for a quick second. So,
Sure. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year's. Yeah. So you were, and I don't want to you're running trap houses.
Yeah.
But your split, it was a model. It was a business model.
Correct. It formed very quickly and turned into, honestly, just like another business.
Okay, so I'm your customer. I own a home with a badass basement.
Yes, sir.
With floor drains because I'm just I'm a floor drain type of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sell me.
So essentially, what are you guys keeping in your basement?
Well, my ex-wife, real bitch, she had 9 cats. So, you know, we got cat scratch poles and, cat carriers and cat food and stuff like that.
How much money is that making you a year down there?
Well, 50% of everything I earned my whole life, but basically zero.
Okay. So you got enough space to set up roughly a 16-light flower, 6-light veg, and we could just dry it in the flower room. So you figure we could turn 32 pounds 4 times a year pretty conservatively in this
4
space.
times a year?
Yep.
Okay.
So half of that would be about 64 pounds. So you can do as you want with the 64 pounds or their cash value, or you can continue to keep your wife's cat stuff down here.
Okay, so you're going to grow for me.
I'm going to do everything. All you're going to do is give me a key and keep people out of it.
Who provides the lights?
Me.
Who provides the newts?
Me.
The labor?
Me. The plants.
So I just give you
the
a
tables,
place.
You just give me the place.
But
the
I have my
security,
medical license.
That's fine. You
Okay.
got to make sure you got enough patients for how many plants we're going to have at your property.
Okay.
So if we're allowed to have 12 plants per patient, you're allowed to have up to 5 patients plus yourself. Total of 72 plants in the state of Michigan that you could have at your house under the medical caregiver program.
Okay.
Well, if you're doing 16 lights, you figure 4 times 16 is 64 plants. That leaves you 8 mom plants for your veg area.
Yep.
And you're completely legal. You could have an inspection at any time. This is all above board. And
So I'll keep 64 pounds.
Roughly per year.
Keep 64 pounds.
Yes.
And can you just sell mine?
In theory, we could trade them out for cash value.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. So you got the opportunity to maybe make a
point or two on his
sure,
half.
that's fair.
Absolutely.
Otherwise,
That's
I'd be out in the streets
cost of business,
or
yeah.
whatever. That's
and if
amazing.
you have a better opportunity, then that's your half to do so as you please.
That's a great business
Sounds like
model.
I'm moving to Michigan.
Yeah.
I know, right?
And it all started with me and a rented, I think it was actually, I moved up from Florida. My cousin had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath manufactured trailer double wide home. And he had 2 plants under a 1,000-watt HPS on a light mover. And they were 8 months old, and they were in soil. And he said, "Hey, do you want to flower these? I can't get them to go into flower. I've been trying." Just turns out his timer was set properly, but he didn't have it on timer on. He had it on, which small mistake for a working individual to not realize it was going off. So anyways, started looking into it and started to realize, okay, these plants actually have webs on them. What is this? I started doing forum searches. Spider mites. So, okay, we're dealing with plants with spider mites. Start spending a couple $100 on products to fight spider mites on 8-month-old plants in soil under a 1,000-watt HPS. Long story short, about 4 months later, we ended up getting some product off of that. Wasn't really usable, but it got me in that 4 months into the learning phase of things. And then I started to collect fresh clones from local growers who had healthy stock, and I started putting those in the bathroom and then sanitize the room. I put 4 lights up, 4 HPSs, and started to increase the plant count. And then,
So this was your proof of concept. low risk on both parties,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you get the vibe of what it's like to work in someone else's home. And I imagine there's all kinds of intricacies, like, do you text before you show up? What's the dynamic? Do you have a key? Do you just show up? What if the guy's naked in his, Barco lounger? If they even still make Barco loungers, I don't even know if that's a real thing.
So I kept it very professional.
Yep.
I actually installed an Arlo Pro 2, shout out to Arlo, security camera system at every house.
Okay.
So on my phone, I would have, let's say, Rick, Bob, Steve, and Mike. I would have access to the security system that I put up at each of their homes. That's audio, video, night vision, infrared, motion detection, all that stuff. And I would place them inside the actual space where everything is kept and on the door leading into the space so that it's no invasion of their privacy, but he has a login to his camera system. Each person would have it, and I have a master account that logged into all. So I would be able to see every single time that door got opened, whether it was his kid checking out what was in the room or whatever. Sure. But I would also have a lock that only him, the wife, if they had one, and myself would have keys to, so in case they needed to get in there for any reason while I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And as far as scheduling goes, I'm a very easygoing person to where if I find out, hey, this guy's got a semi-business and he leaves every day at 5 a.m. and gets home at 3, well, I better get all my work done in between those hours because I don't want to interrupt this guy's life. I don't need his kids to know what's going on.
He just wants the money.
Exactly.
Or the product.
And honestly, most of the people I worked with, they weren't young tattooed thugs. They were 40, 50, 60-year-old men with families that honestly were just looking to make supplement it. Yeah, they were hardworking guys that had kids and realized, hey, inflation's hitting hard. We need to get ahead. And this is an opportunity for me. This goes back to the hours. I think that was what started this side tangent. At one point, I had 8 rooms in 5 different houses in 4 different counties. It was the drive time that actually killed me, not the work time. I had gotten my workload extremely efficient, but traveling 45 minutes here, 45, all that stuff adds up.
8 rooms in 5 geographically different homes.
Yes.
Okay.
One had 2, the rest had 1.
So 5 clients was your.
Yep.
That's a lot.
Yep. So, but
one client's a lot.
So that would some weeks with my girlfriend at the time and myself doing 100% of all the work, sometimes end up being 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. 7 days a week. So, we're talking 19-hour days, 7 days a week on the worst of it. When you're harvesting, when you're leaf stripping, when you're doing that.
Sounds like a young person shop.
But then there would be the good weeks. Yeah. Where, it'd just be, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So like 11-hour days, 7 days a week. Those were the good ones. So anywhere from like 70 to 100-hour weeks is what I was averaging from 2018, 19, 20. And on top of that, I was working with 3 or 4 companies in the industry selling lights, nutrients, dehumidifiers.
So in a way, you're almost kind of double dipping, right? Because you're obviously using the lights, nutrients, and stuff. And so
correct.
That's kind of how. So that's awesome. That you could run a business like that.
Yeah. 5
clients. I mean, the money must have been great. Like, the motivation must have been easy.
Got me
here.
Well,
hold on. It's never easy to work 100 hours a week. But with that kind of cash flow and cheddar coming in, you're getting up for a reason in the morning.
Not having a boss is the most, trying to think of the word, liberating feeling I think you can experience as an adult. I was a restaurant manager. I've done landscaping. I've done pool service. I've done just about all the nifty ways you think you're going to get rich starting a business. And I've also worked for multiple restaurants. And I can tell you dealing with customers is great. That's why I learned I was okay at sales.
Yeah, you are a people person.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed all of that aspect of it. What I didn't enjoy was the trade-off of time for money. And I've realized, if anyone listening can make this realization earlier, all the more power to you. So, I'm 31 years old now, and it was when I was about 26 that I decided I'm never going to, start working for anyone again. So I started growing a beard, and that was kind of my own personal, like, hey, I know that in order to, yeah, because I was a restaurant manager. I used to look similar, actually cleaner shaven than that even.
I stay clean cut for a reason. Yeah. Because I was growing in Texas for like 18 years. Yeah. So, golf shirt, clean cut. Nobody's pulling me over,
So like I started...
Allegedly. I should mention that for legal purposes.
So I started, everything we're talking about today is alleged. So I started growing the beard and started just, like I said, back to that trailer with my cousin. We were doing landscaping at the time, And that was kind of how I was keeping enough money to go buy the supplies to fight this powdery mildew and spider mites. And by the way, it was powdery mildew and spider mites on those
Michigan's
inherited
not an
plants.
easy state to grow in.
No, and it was in a double wide trailer with 8-month-old plants and no ventilation. So that air had just been accumulating in a closed room for 8 months. Don't do that. So that starting off that way, I think was a huge advantage for me because I learned all the bad things. So many growers take from you and I on Instagram to start their first grow, and it goes great. They get over 2 pounds of light, everything's happy. But then on that third run, they get a little lazy, and now they got spider mites and this, but it's on a big scale. Now their whole 16 lighters messed up because they had this false sense of confidence. I got to learn the hard way. And I started out back when you were, it was all forums. We didn't have this luxury of going on YouTube and watching how to just build stuff.
And even if you did have buddies you could call,
We didn't really talk about it.
No, if you did, you'd go buy a burner from Walmart just in case.
Yeah, and by the way, the trips to the hydro store where you guys are like Amazoning stuff straight to your door now.
That seems crazy.
It's mind-blowing because we used to like borrow our uncle's van and then go to a Burger King and sit down inside and eat afterwards and then go to a gas station and then drop off half the stuff at one guy's. Like, this is just to buy cocoa and like steaks and netting.
Yeah.
This is how it used to be. So
we ought to do, let's do a back in my day show. Maybe like we're on episode 2, maybe like episode 5 or 6. Let's do a back in my day.
Oh yeah. I remember going into the local hydro stores that I would go into, and it was always, it was the unspoken rule. They would even have a sign up. If you mention any growing of any illegal substance, we will ask you to leave. I mean, just by talking about it,
Oh, yeah.
So it was just like
big tomatoes back
then.
then.
I'm telling you, I grew like 3 pounds of tomatoes off this 1,000.
Yeah, you got to be very careful on that word. Believe it or not, fun fact, side tangent, if you used to call, it was General Hydroponics. I made that foolish mistake in like 2014, I think. I called the General Hydroponics phone number. And, I'm thinking they make the 3-part, the trio, it's in every store. It's in Home Depot at this point. Yeah. Like, this is a staple. So I get on the customer service line, and I'm like a new grower about to ask them about this deficiency I'm seeing on my cannabis plant. And I actually got the dial tone from a legitimate company so quick you couldn't even count it. So they asked me what was going on, and I said, yeah, I got some plants here. They're showing yellowing on their leaves, and they're like, what type of plant is it? And I was like, these are some clones I got from my buddy, and they're like, I'm sorry, is this cannabis? And then I said, yes. They clicked. So I called back, waited through the whole process, got a different person, started to ask questions, and they said, sorry, we can't answer any questions about anything for improper use of our product, and hung up on me.
Wow.
So General Hydroponics just 8 years ago wouldn't even let you talk on the phone to them about cannabis. That's how, when we started, things were not easy.
You want to talk about business models? What an amazing business model. Everybody. And just, I'm not throwing shade at anybody. General Hydroponics, Advanced Nutrients, a Sun System, this, that, and the other. Every manufacturer would make a product that's sold at an incredible markup, probably mostly purchased with cash. Zero accountability, zero customer service. Let's call it 2% customer service required because you're
improperly using it.
It's too expensive to use on cucumbers and tomatoes.
Yeah.
So 98% of people are using it to grow cannabis. Well, they don't support growing cannabis. That's improper use. So the customer service people must have just been like kicking back, chilling. I mean, what an amazing time.
Well, I mean, and just think about nutrient companies in general, right? So, all the inputs, I mean, a lot of them come from China now, but used to, Axo Nobel was one of the biggest ones that made your nutrient inputs that were really good. So Axo will actually own like Sickens brand. So if you've ever seen a nice cabin that has a really nice looking stain on the outside, that's Sickens. Well, they own a lot of, they're almost like a Dow chemical. Dow makes the same, right? So it's all the same inputs. So it's just whoever comes up with the newest artwork to slap on the outside of a effing bottle. You know what I mean? It's like, oh no, this will grow the big bud.
Oh, yeah. I legitimately bought thousands of dollars worth of bud candy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, remember a product called Liquid Karma?
I do.
It was basically a bottle saying, hey, like karma. I believe in karma in the universe. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to cut somebody off.
They were playing the hippie card hard.
Literally, but that and just buy this, man. Yeah. It can't hurt you.
Yeah.
It's karma. I mean, who knows if it did anything? There's probably 98% deionized water, some like I bet you could make liquid karma with like one of those $10 bottles of Super Thrive Alive that you get from Home Depot.
Super Thrive,
put
yeah.
5 drops in DI and then sell for $38.
What do you remember? Do you remember that Bloombastic?
Yes.
I
Oh
bought
my
that stuff.
God.
Yeah.
That stuff was like, what? It came in a metal can and it was maybe this big and
Yep.
was like $300 or $400. I'm like, what the hell is in that?
But
you know
you
what I mean?
felt like, but let's be real.
I never bought it.
At that time, when we saw a product that was hundreds of dollars, we thought, this is what our garden is missing. This is what we need to get to their level.
And it felt good to buy it.
It really did.
It felt good to drop that $200 because you thought you were bringing home this holy grail that is going to take you to the next level.
Mills pays the bills, Heavy 16, Canna, shout out to all 3 of them. You all make great products, but dropping that bag, like upgrading from General Hydroponics to one of those, I was like, okay, this is going to cost me 4 times as much, but my product's going to be better. And the placebo effect worked in my brain to where, because I spent so much more to grow it, I felt like the product was better, only to find out my patients had no, they couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
They could not tell the difference. Only my wallet could. And then that's when I learned, that's what started, and this is years ago, my quest for knowledge about all these things, about lights, about nutrients, dehumidifiers, what makes them different, the TXV valves in them. And you start to see that this green tax, it kind of
What green tax?
The green tax, like products that are typically used in other industries that are somewhat affordable, and then the company finds out that it can be used in the cannabis space, and they put that green tax on it. Yeah. So they slap a fancy label and a fancy sticker on a product that's available under a different name, but now it costs 2x because it's used for the purpose, and they're advertising it for the purpose of cannabis use. And so I started to, as a grower, see through a lot of that, and that's when the DIY LEDs started to come about, and that's how I found out about you.
I didn't see through that in that regard. In lights, I did, but I felt like it was too risky to go to Home Depot or to go to the garden center.
Yeah.
This stuff's got kind of an ambiguous weed leaf on it.
Yeah.
I'll just pay quadruple for that because it's too risky. But
But
now
shout
all
out to
these
Green
years later,
Jeans. Shout out to Green Jeans,
shout out
because
to Green Jeans.
Green Jeans is who.
Jax.
Yes, Jack's Hydroponics. He was the first guy to get me to drop the expensive brands.
Yeah.
I went and bought 1500 and I think it's 51226 in Epsom salt. I ran as 321, and then I even bought the monopotassium phosphate and did the 3221 variation in flour. And after a year, I realized, okay, this is getting me as much yield as I used to get. However, my quality, too much nitrogen in these plants, and I started to get picky about how I wanted my plants to look. Because once you get to the yield you want, because as a beginning grower, I know we all want 3 to 4 pounds of light. It's the only thing we can think about. But once you get there, you're going to start getting picky about how good you want your medicine to be.
You want less. I'll take 2.5.
I'll take 2.5 of great over 3.5 of okay.
Yeah.
Or even 3.5 good, because great has a different effect. It's something I would want to pull out and show to you guys. Whereas if it's good, I'll probably just wait till later. If you ask me if I have something, I'll roll it up first so you don't have to see it. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's that sense of pride we have when it just comes out right. And this is going to be a great roll into the topic we're having today of Ppfd. Yeah. Because for newer growers and not understanding the environmental changes needed to support higher light intensity, it will actually diminish the quality and bag appeal of a lot of product if light intensity is used improperly. Yeah. And that was a massive learning curve for me, going from HPS to double-ended HPS to DIY LED to HLG LED. Yeah. And I can tell you, after all these years of knowledge and learning and trials and tribulations, I'm with HLG and I use HLG for a reason. I cannot build a product better, nor could I build it nearly as affordable.
But you tried.
We tried.
You built some LEDs, right?
I've built tens of thousands of dollars of Cobb LEDs on just a few videos of watching you. I was like, I have to do this. It obviously works. He's slaying it. So I built a 6 Cobb version.
And for those of you who don't know, Wolverine never really was into the whole YouTube and the voiceovers and the editing thing.
No.
So he kind of built his brand. And I don't like saying my brand, bro. But like now everything's social media. So you built your brand.
Yeah.
on
The persona. Let's go with
your
persona.
persona and
Yep.
your brand, which is not that far from your actual personality. Like
Yep.
you're a super personable guy. You're really helpful.
Yep.
You like to like after all this time, you haven't even gotten jaded when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, dude, how should I spec this, that, or the other?"
No, I love it.
You help them. You actually
Yeah.
love it. But you built your brand on Instagram, and so you never did those full length videos of this amazing setup. You just show up on Instagram one day with this. It looks like that scene on the Star Trek movies where the Enterprise kind of goes over,
Takes over the whole screen.
or like one of the destroyers in Star Wars. Your freaking room looked like that, and I couldn't even count how many chip on board. And you were using like Veros or something like that.
So we actually went with Luminous CXM 22 version 3, 3,500 Kelvin, 90 CRIs.
Okay. So quick tangent there, and these guys may do a podcast with us. So we're going to be doing some new business in Canada, and we've got a couple of distributors up there, and one of them is a longtime customer of mine, or I'm a longtime, customer of mine. They used to sell these stainless steel medical grow boxes called the BC Northern Lights.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
that was literally the back 2 pages of every High Times.
Oh, yeah.
I would covet that thing.
Oh, I used to worship that thing like I could afford that. Well,
what's it called again?
The BC Northern Lights.
BC Northern Lights. Okay.
Yeah. So I one of the first contracts I got was I was building the Maximizer, which was the duct cooled LED light with the Cobbs, the CXB 3590s. Well, those CXBs were pretty damn expensive, right?
They were like
Those were Crees, were they not?
They were
yeah.
Cree,
Yeah.
but
So when I
retail
bought-
on them was $75.
I was
and
getting them for 40.
wholesale
I was getting them for $45 when I was buying them direct from Cree, but I had to buy. I think at the time I had to buy 10 grand worth at a time.
Do we have to go on the Wayback Machine to go to Johnson Grow Lights?
I don't know.
See if you can do that,
maybe.
Chad. Our producer
Maybe.
Chad's in the house. See if you can go Wayback Machine and search Johnson Grow Lights.
So what really changed things, what really clicked this idea in my head to even go where we're at today was, so I reached out to Blair, who I'm hoping will be on the show possibly. And I said, hey, I got thinking about these grow boxes because I built this Home Depot grow cabinet, right? And it was hot. It was hard to grow. I had a 600 HPS in there. It's fucking ridiculous, in a cool tube.
Yeah.
But it was still hot, even with a 6-inch fan. It was just really hard to grow. But I did get it down right, but it was hard. Well, so I got to think about these grow boxes, and I worshiped them, and I was like, oh my God, those things have to be on fire with 400 HPSs in something as small as my cabinet. So I got to thinking about it. I was like, hey, have you guys ever considered LED? And they're like, yeah, we tried this one. And so they tried, California Lightworks, and they tried some other name brands, and they tried this one. I can't remember the name of it, but it is a tunable spectrum job. And they said, the quality was okay, but the yield just wasn't there compared to, our HPSs. So I tell you what, man, why don't you let me build a light custom for your box? I said, I'll build a custom light for your box. So they were taking in, so there's that glass in the top of this thing, right?
Yep.
So they would take and they would cut out a hole in this Mount California Lightworks in there,
Okay.
or this other Canna something light. I can't remember the name of it. They'll probably remember. But so I went a total different route. I signed an NDA. They sent me the drawings of the thing. So I just get the dimensions of the glass. I cut out aluminum and I put these cobs with the lenses on there, right?
Yeah.
And I sent them out there, and they were skeptical at first. I thought, it's just white light. I was like, yeah, let's try them. They called back and like, okay, we need you to make us a price and we'll sign a PO. And it was like Amit was beside himself because
they did
it
a
was
grow
like,
with it, and they were like, holy crap.
Yeah, they were like, holy crap, these are awesome. And this is the first time we've matched our HPSs with LED. So I think so I started out, I thought, okay, 2 400s, I put 320 watts in each side.
Yep.
It was way overkill, so we ended up going 240, HLG 240 on the 4 cobs on each side,
Yep.
and had 8 cobs in that thing, and it was actually pretty damn efficient. Running 4 cobs on a 240 driver was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think I moved to those CXMs, and I really liked the 3500K 90 CRIs, what I moved them to, and it crushed.
Well,
Were you skeptical of only white light? Because you got to remember, at this time in history, HPS was orange, so everybody knew you needed it to look like a street light to grow good bud. right? And then the LEDs come out and they look like this.
Blurple.
Purple and blue
Yeah.
mixed together. So white light was a dissenting strategy. It was like, no, that's just straight white light.
So no
that was
shade.
a big part of it.
okay.
I will say
It was LED. People were like worried about LEDs not working, and then they were worried about white LED not having the color.
Right. So no shade. So I will say that one of the companies that's still in business today, a few of them aren't, right?
Yeah.
So I was in one of the first trade shows we did in Denver. Keynote speaker from one of these LED companies. Plants don't use green light. That's why they're green. That was actually promulgated because back in like 77, 78 or something, they done that test where they took algae and they smeared it out and they said, oh, look, the chlorophyll responds to this blue light and this red light, and that's all you need, you know.
You're right. And that's an important thing. You know, we still value the McCree curve and McCree, but in 1972, McCree was testing algae, right? Like and other plants. He was
Well, no, McCree was an average of 26 different crops.
This was the New Hampshire, like University of New Hampshire.
Yeah,
study
this
or
was the
something with
smear
that.
of just algae, you know.
Right.
But when McCree did it,
non-terrestrial-
McCree did 26 crops and got the average
That's
of
right,
what the
that's
photo.
right.
So that's why green light is there, and it's at 70, 80% efficient, which is not terrible. But
Not zero.
But back then, that's what they sell. You know, that's what the UFO. You had $1,000
Hey,
UFO.
look at how big of a fan you used to be of mine. Johnson Grow Lights, 485 followers. Look how many grow mouses are in the first couple pages. There's my cob light. There's my quantum canopy, the orange thing there. Is that a video? Oh, you got to log in. Yeah, dude, that was my first, the first 6 out of 50
There's one of the
boards.
first lights I ever built.
There you go.
The
Okay, so this
maximizer
is what
dude.
we're talking about.
With the lenses,
The lenses. It was basically a big ass air cooled. That looks like a Raptor. Or a Mac.
It was basically if you remember, Sun Systems had something called the Blockbuster.
Yes, it preceded the Magnum Triple XL. Then it was the Blockbuster. It was a little beefier hood.
Yeah, so the Blockbuster was a 24 by 24, and so
comment if you used a Blockbuster or a Triple XL in the comment section.
Absolutely. So I ran the Triple XL, and I thought the light spread was a little weak because the plant canopy wasn't getting as much penetration. That Blockbuster seemed like the perfect 4x4. I got more yield every time, so I'm like, this is the shape I want.
Yeah.
So I always said, okay. So there's always been a hot spot. So you would even see people that when they built grow lights, they would be like, any cob light. There was always not. So the maximizer said, let's get rid of that cob in the middle and see what happens. And sure enough, push that light out, and it's all going to overlap always.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my big thing is it's always going to overlap, and so your center's always going to hot spot. Why add to that hot spot and use wattage that's not going to be very?
I always had that philosophy too.
Yeah.
And that ethos, design ethos, and philosophy. It's not even a philosophy. It's just numbers and science. Look how it has prevailed today in the Scorpion Diablo or the new SDX Scorpion Diablo. Like, it's the same fundamental design philosophy. So it's not like you're a flip-flopper.
No.
Your first lights from, I don't even know what the date was, 2015 or 16 is the same. And then that one down there in the middle, that was a factory kind of job with the nine.
So that light was built in China.
Yeah.
But it didn't have those cobs in it. So the original, they had these. They were cobs, but they were red and blue diodes, like really cheap AC cobs.
Yeah.
So I just basically took that case because, look, let's face reality. Amit and I started with $25,000 and a fucking credit card that was like $20,000. That's what we had.
Yeah.
That's where HLG came from.
Yeah.
$25,000 and $20,000 credit card. So it's like, where can I buy these cases at cheap? So I bought the cases.
That was the hard part.
Yeah.
So the electronics, the wiring, the driver configuration, the forward voltage, that was the easy part.
Yeah.
The hard part was
chopping steel and aluminum was the hard part.
So when I went,
I'll get back to you in a second.
Yeah.
So when I come to local suppliers at the time to have this made, they're like, yeah, it'll be like a $10,000 die charge, and I'm like, okay, that ain't happening. So China was like, I'll sell you this for this, and it was like, okay, we'll just buy some cases. Yeah. So we're putting them together for a long time ourselves. And then the guy was like, hey, look, why don't you just let me put this together? And it got to where I couldn't keep up. So I was doing all this in my basement. I was putting BC Northern Lights and stuff together, and we were shipping them like 2 or 3 pallets a month. And I was still doing drywall all day long. I was getting up I was be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, start doing drywall, and I would get home about 6 o'clock, and then I would work on lights until midnight. And then on the weekends, if I did get a weekend day off, it was lights the entire time. So I worked continually, nonstop. And eventually, it just got to where I couldn't keep up. So I had to let something happen. But then those lights lasted, not very long. that we started, and then we joined.
To be clear, the lights were capable of running many tens of thousands of hours longer, right? They didn't burn out.
I'm just saying before
the momentum of the industry. Like Cobb's was I thought Cobb's or chip on board LEDs was going to be this epoch or era.
Oh yeah,
right.
I invested what would have been a used car.
Well, it was
a blip.
And the reason that happened
2 cycles
was
that blip.
This is why.
That's your fault.
It is my fault.
Yeah.
So a couple
Yeah.
reasons why that
You cost me a lot of money when you made those cheaper lights that were better.
Well. So what happened was, you're looking at Cobb's and it was like, okay, this is something I can put together at home and acquire parts and put it together. Well, you're not going to solder 304 LEDs on that original QV304 onto a PCB.
And then do it 6 times.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you weren't going to do that.
I didn't even look at diodes. I only looked at chip on boards because of you and green
It had
jeans.
a positive and a negative. That's it.
And PLC, I believe at the time, was what green jeans was starting, right? So when you asked about white light, my confidence, the reason I'm bringing that up is when you were making your videos showing your DIY lights, which might have only been over a 4x8 area in that particular beginning, and his might have only been in a 4x8. I could see how lush and green and healthy those plants were. And what made sense to me now, and I don't know if maybe you pointed this out at the time, was that when you go into an HPS room, it seems very unnatural. When you go outside, what you see seems natural. And seeing a white light over a plant, to me, was like, whoa. They have the best videos on YouTube. They have the best pictures on Instagram.
It was awesome to film it.
And it was because you guys had a better spectrum light. It wasn't that you had better cameras. It was that the plants looked better in that light.
No, they look better to the human eye. Like green is the most sensitive spectra to the human eye, right?
So when you ask about confidence, I actually thought from my hillbilly not understanding light spectrum performance, like, well, this looks more like the sun, so this should do even better than HPS.
Right.
That's where I naturally
That's
thought.
where I went to, was like, okay, these plants evolved for millions of years outside and it ain't purple outside, and it sure ain't orange as hell.
It doesn't. It's not red in the morning and blue at night.
No,
it's just full spectrum white is how it appears. So my confidence was high seeing you in green jeans, and when a lot of people, when they build a DIY light, they might set aside $300, $500, which I did. However, all it took was for me to do it. I built this 6 Cobb's, 6 heat sinks, and some aluminum that I bought at Home Depot. I think I copied your exact dimensions, where you even did your rivets. I used cable ties instead of like metal to hold things together.
Metal's hard to work with. If you never work with metal, it's kind of hard, even if it's aluminum.
Especially when you don't have tools and you're just getting started and stuff, and you're barely even a grower at this point. But I got into it because I wanted to advance in the hobby. I wanted to stay relevant, and I wanted to not, I wanted to have an edge over my buddies who were HPS guys. And so I copied what you guys did, and I literally made a light for a 3x3 tent. And I realized those Cobb's, because I didn't put the reflector domes on them, they were just open.
Yep.
My light went everywhere. Yep. So like it bounced off the walls of the tent. This thing was incredible. So I started just a few seeds in there thinking, let's test and see if these are good for seeds. Well, my God, that spectrum for seeds, I had such massive, big, fat leaves. They were so healthy. I overgrew that tent and had to buy a second 4x4 just to... So I had a 4x4 and a 3x3 just to now keep up with the growth on that, right?
The growth rate.
So what I did was then I bought more parts to buy a 4x4. But then when I saw that, I thought, well, we got this basement over here that's a 10x10. So let me just build a light for a 10x10. So you were a
typical weed grower.
But I mean,
that's always when you start
Steve,
out, right?
I mean, like this was in the matter of 2 to 3 weeks. Like I
shit.
ordered the parts, I put them together, and shout out to Jamie from Cobb Kits.
Cobb Kits, so he used to sell the quantum boards forever. Jamie's a cool cat.
He hooked me up.
Let me tell you, he had some interesting stuff. He was doing biodiesel back then too.
Oh wow.
So he had a really cool setup, man. He was
very intelligent guy.
Yeah, so back then people were having to pay to get their grease taken away at these restaurants, and he would be like, "I'll take your grease away," and they're like, "Please do. You don't even have to pay me." No kidding.
He was converting into fuel.
Yeah, he was making it into diesel fuel.
Wow.
So this dude was driving around on biodiesel.
See, that's
way
the kind of
back in the
hustler.
day.
That's the kind of hustler I like to support.
This was killer smart.
Well, Jamie at Cobb Kits, because I think you had brought up maybe I want to say it was called like DigiKey, or there were a couple websites where you could buy drivers and Cobb's.
Right.
But Cobb Kits was a guy who understood the horticultural side of it, in my opinion.
And I answered thousands of comments of what kind of wire, what gauge wire.
Oh,
what
yeah. I
brand
probably
wire.
asked you
How
quite
do
a
I
few,
mount?
yeah.
Like remember back in the day on the forums, what was the majority of your day? What driver does this many?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What can I
driver
do
does
with a
this many?
320 HLG driver? Yeah.
Well, and I explain this to people all the time. It's like, it really is simple to size a driver to a LED. And when you teach them the math of it, they're like, oh,
But
that's
let
what
me
I always
disagree
did.
with you though. Is it though? Let's pretend for a moment
Yeah,
that
it was
you don't know
very
what,
overwhelming at first.
Let's pretend for a moment you didn't know what pH was.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about any scientific percentage
no, at
hydrogen
all.
or any ions. pH.
Yep.
No freaking clue.
Yeah, never thought about it, never had any
You don't
relevance.
know
Yep.
what a parts per million is,
Yep.
or a total dissolved solid, or an electrical
VPD
conductivity.
or CO, yeah, any of that.
And I say, here you go, bro. Here's Jack's 321. Mix it up and feed your plants. That's the equivalent to, I don't know what a volt is.
Yeah.
I don't know what an amp is. How am I supposed to know what
And let me just say
voltage
this, from having like a non-electrical background as a standard hillbilly, I actually even thought, is there a chance I could die wiring this? Like that's how little I knew about the voltage and stuff. I know that when you're doing house outlets, you can die. When you're doing automotive stuff, you could die. So I'm like, I had to watch his videos and then go reverse, and pause and watch, because even something as simple as where's the red wire and the blue wire go? Like I felt like I was in the movie like Speed with Sandra Bullock, like disarming the bomb on the bus when I was building this light. Like to me,
I feel
I
you.
can
So
tell
it
you,
just-
maybe
it
some
just
people's
made-
natural,
it
but
just
to
made
some
sense
people
to
it's
me,
not
you know?
natural.
I don't know why that is. Like when Super would when Super was the one I really learned from, right? So when I saw what he wired up in series and said this is the driver, I said, okay, so if you're in series, and then I was like, ding, it's like a remote control.
But see, you say series and parallel, and even right now, I started to sweat a little because I was like, "Shit, which one's?"
Well, see, that's what-
and I'm
that-
8 years into the game
and
now.
it came so easy to me because it was like series, which is like, okay, so you put your remote control batteries in, right?
God, that's such a great analogy.
And you so that's my gift, by the
When
way,
you
is
put
analogies, right?
Here's the
So-
difference
Yeah.
between series and parallel. When you take your TV remote,
and you put the batteries in, and the positive touches the negative.
the nipple parts both facing up is what?
Yeah. So
That's-
if they're
that's
together
typically-
this way, that's parallel, right? If you do one to the other, the voltage is now adding up, and that's series. So here you have half the voltage, twice the current. Here you have twice the voltage, half the current. It's pretty simple. And then you start looking at the quantum boards. It's like, okay, so if I take a 2.7 volt diode and I put 10 in a string, let's say for simplicity, is 27 volts.
Yeah.
There you go. And then I'm like, okay, so this driver needs to fit this. So, and then it all just went. As soon as I looked at that one diagram of putting 4 on a 185 driver, I said, 185, I think it's 1750 or 1400, one or the other. And I said,
The HLG,
okay, this is how this all works. Parallel series.
I still have this all memorized. The Meanwell HLG 185-1400B has 143 volts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I had so many comments I
that's what
answered.
I'm
I had to
saying.
memorize this so I could.
So it wasn't that. I would
Divided
just-
by how many? Yeah.
So that's what I tell people is just look at your voltage, and I'll actually give each person that used to call in a tech, I would teach them how to size a driver.
Yeah, so you don't have to do it at the call again.
Yeah,
Give a man
it's
a
a good
fish.
investment.
And I tell
Yeah.
you, so I tell you, there's a few stitches on my hand. You know, 'cause the customer service gets to you after about 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, because you get crazy with it because it's just don't stop, right? But
And it's not
I'll
their
tell you-
fault. We
No,
understand it's
not your fault.
complicated.
Yeah.
You all, but we
Yeah.
sometimes are answering the same question 20 times a day. And for us, we have to realize, like, hey, it's not your guys' fault. You're
I think
learning.
we're speaking from a nostalgic, fond memory situation.
Yeah,
it might have been
absolutely.
frustrating in the
Yeah,
moment.
so
In the
but-
moment.
So
yeah.
let me tell you,
Looking
though,
back on it, I'm so glad we did it.
So when I answered the phones, the best one, and I still laugh to this day, was I can't remember what the guy did, and he blew something up. I said, you know what, man, I'll take care of you. Just send an email with your order number to warranty at horticulturalightinggroup.com. I think it was what it was at the time before we bought HLG.com. And I said, just send it to warranty at horticulturalightinggroup.com. And he calls back and he goes, hey man, how do you spell warranty? That I was like,
Easily Google.
this guy found my phone number on Google.
So he
and
did
he's
an
like,
investigation to get your phone number.
and I swear I laughed. And then there was another. I did probably one of the meanest things I ever said though was this guy, and a really good fan. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I guess he was probably sounded like he was about 85 years old. I mean, hello, Sonny. I mean, that old, you know,
Yeah.
and he was growing some petunias or something, right? So he calls and he was like, I just want you to know that you got a fan for life. And my little smart ass, I hung up the phone. I looked at Joe and I said, well, we got another. He said, you got a customer in life. I said, we got a customer about 6 more months. You know? And I'm like,
That's evil.
And that was so terrible
I'm
of
glad
me.
you're not in customer service anymore.
I went to work for another grow light company, co-found a grow light company after all the grow mouse stuff, you know. But at the time with grow mouse, it was just text. It was avatars and text. So I was like, oh, this is some 24-year-old weed bro, you know, like me or whatever. But when I worked for a company and they had access to me via email and I could hear their voice,
learned your name.
I started realizing, you know, there's people of all walks. Old heads, African violet growers, succulent, like 70, 80, 22, 18.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter.
I'm good with the Russians, the Persians, the Chaldeans. I've learned.
And on that topic of my name, you know, I've been going by this Grow Mouse moniker because I had to disguise my identity.
Same with the Wolverine. That's where it all began.
You know, I don't know. Amit brought up a point. I think I'm just going to go by Brian G.
There you go.
So I'm just slowly like an old man getting into a bath. I'm like, Brian G.
Brian G.
Okay. I mean, that's my name.
I like it.
And the G for Grow Mouse, Brian G.
I like it.
So you can call me Brian G.
Still call me Wolverine.
Okay.
But
Statute of limitations. Anyway.
But yeah, so that part I never did really, you know, I think it was just kind of, you know, I switched gears pretty quick when I started selling LEDs, and I just, you know, it was just like, I can't grow anymore.
To recap back on the cob part.
I lost out on a lot of money because I wanted to continue growing. I should have immediately stopped growing or moved out of Texas and started shilling cob kits like cobkits.com because the money was not in the margin on the cob, the margin of the driver. You could buy them retail and sell them for $1 more or less than you paid for it. The money was in selecting the correct components, putting them in an easy to purchase kit with a full PDF with videos and
wiring
I tell you who else did a
that.
killer job on that was Dan.
Timber Grow Lights. Shout out Dan.
Shout out to you.
Dan did a good job at that as well.
I think they're still.
He did a really good job at that as well. And you know, we used to we would actually go together, and so basically Dan would buy his heat sinks from us, and we would charge him at cost. But what we would do is use it as like a group buy, and that's how we actually got those pin heat sinks down to where hell you could afford them. Because in the smaller quantities, them son of a bitches were expensive.
And that is why Jamie at Cob Kits, because back to not to drone back too far, but when I went crazy on my light builds, the 10 by 10 space, once I showed my buddies what I was going to do, I showed them how much it was going to cost, what we expected to get out of it. They wanted to go in on it for their rooms as well. So we did 64 cobs, 64 heat sinks, and 16 320-watt drivers per 10 by 10.
So doing some quick math, you have 100 square feet, and you have a 64 square foot on-center lighting array, which gives you...
The lighting array was 100 square feet.
Okay, so you had slightly more than one... you had Chad, our producer, is saying, don't forget about the topic of the show, the 1,000 micromole thing. So we're going to get to that, but go ahead.
We're coming in quick on it.
Let's cap off this first introductory 37-minute thing by. We met each other. You saw some of my cob stuff.
Copied it like crazy,
but innovated in a way that was very cool.
So nobody had done it at the scale that I was thinking of doing it. With 4 drivers, that's 1,280 watts per 5x5 for those listening. So more wattage than the double-endeds I was already using. But my theory was I want to get 3.5. I don't want to get 2.5. I don't want to just save wattage. At that point, I was about getting yield. Right. And that's what we're going to talk about here soon. But so my theory was if I just overblast it with light, I will get yield. And I did. And I actually had the highest yield of my growing career to that point under my first run under the new cobs. Now, granted, I had gotten probably 3 years of growing under my belt at that point. I had been taking advice from you, Green Jeans. I was using Jack's 321. And my reference earlier to why I was so afraid of wiring, I'm remembering now, it was also my first time going from 120 to 240 volt lights. I was never at scale. All my 1,000 watt HPSs were on 120 watt ballasts. This was my first time running new breakers, new 12-3 line,
very scary.
new outlets, and I couldn't call an electrician. I couldn't call anyone over, so I just had to YouTube it and hope, okay, I'm going to turn the main breaker off and start touching stuff. Hope I don't die. Yeah. And so that is maybe where my fear came in. Not so much on the driver's side. It was more on the wiring side.
I mean, when you go from 120, that stings.
Yeah.
You go up to 240 at any respectable amperage, that's death, right?
Yeah. So
well, 240 is rough. It'll knock you down.
I haven't ever gotten hit by
240. So the first lights I ever built were also my first time ever doing 240.
So real quick, 440 is like insta death, right?
Yeah. 240 will actually will usually throw you off. It's high enough to actually make your legs.
I've seen some growers fall off a ladder.
And if it doesn't, it might blow out like a toenail or something wherever it gets to ground.
It's bad. But
I want to ask you about your watts per ssquare foot in a second.
But yeah, so how I didn't mind that part because I guess I got lucky and I'd built a few houses, for myself and for a couple clients. And what was really cool was I'd bought this wiring book, right? And I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and wire this first house myself. So I bought this wiring book from Home Depot, and it wasn't like how to wire a house for dummies, but it's pretty damn close, right? So I just so I got in the back, and it had all the standards. So read the standards. Okay, I got this. So I wired this first house I've ever wired in my life. Got 3-way switches, all kinds of shit in it. Never done it in my life. Spectre comes in. He goes, who's wired this house? I said, I did it myself. And he looked at me, and he said, how long you been wiring? I said, it's my first one, man. Are you kidding? I said, no. He said, dude, I got 25-year veterans that do a way sloppier job than this right here. He said, kudos to you. He said, you ever think about going and get your license? I said, I'll be straight up honest with you, dude. Crawling underneath that crawl space, pulling those wires with all them spiders and shit underneath there, fuck that. I ain't doing it again. And he just laughed at me, but I did do it again. But doing that plumbing and all that in the crawl space, I hated it. Yeah. But outside of that, and so from there, it was like, okay, I did everything. You know?
Once you have a general understanding.
Yeah.
And as a grower, we all progress. You're all, I'm sure, doing it as well. You're going to become a plumber, an HVAC guy, an electrician. You're going to do just about everything if you're a grower.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can't think of something now, like now as a homeowner and someone who's older, things are so easy now. Like when someone's like, oh, what are we going to do? I'm like, just frame a wall, put up some drywall, putty. It's all so easy now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like running new breakers, running new panels. It's all very easy. Mini splits.
It almost is like if you've ever seen the movie with Bradley Cooper, where Limitless.
Yes, where
he takes the pill and his vision changes, gets more vivid, he starts seeing more detail. It's like after you've been a grower, you can't drive down the street without you'll see like
There's a grow.
You'll see the grows,
16
but you'll
air conditioners.
You'll see like a little cinder block building that's like some defunct garage, and you're like, damn,
that would make a good
grow.
That's the even better one.
You see different.
Yeah. I did that on the way here. I saw a brick building and I was like, that could blend in.
Absolutely. So let me ask you. So watts per square foot is an older metric. It's not like how we're judging grow lights and Scorpion Diablos and stuff. But like back in the day, it was like how many watts per square foot you running, bro? So with the luminous setup at a 100 square foot array, how many watts a foot was that?
So it was 1,280 watts per 25 square foot.
1,280 watts. So if it was 1,000 watts per 25, that'd be 40, but it's 1,200. So it's somewhere in the 52 to 55.
Yeah, so that sounds about right.
That's like
remember, let's be real here. We're so spoiled with these HLGs. My luminous at full power was rated at 1.8 to 1.9 micromole per joule. That's generous. Not that impressive.
But no, it was.
But back then it was because 1.5, 1.6 was what we had.
Because like you said, you had a single-ended HPS. You're at 1.4 with a brand new bulb, brand new reflector. As soon as that reflector starts oxidizing and your bulb gets a little age on it,
1.3, 1.2,
1.3, 1.4, and so yes, you were actually in really good shape back then.
Yeah.
Plus,
from 1.3,
and I overpowered it.
So you guys are talking too fast. So 1.3 micromoles per joule is the average efficacy of a double-ended.
A single.
Used, and he's talking like used into the run.
Used into the run.
At
1.3
micromoles. Hortilux was calling these 1.5 at the time. But he's talking.
Well, so the Hortilux were 1,750 micromoles.
1.3 micromoles up to maybe, let's say, 1.9. Okay, so that's actually a 50% efficacy increase.
Yeah, exactly.
50% more photons per watt.
And my yield showed it.
So if you had cobs or LEDs that had the identical spectrum to HPS, you'd already have 50% more juice.
Yes, and I decided to go with 4 drivers instead of 3, because 3 drivers would have been 960 watts per 5x5, which seems still pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, I want to be known for yields. And at the time, my Instagram was going from like 2,000 followers to 15,000 followers on just that run, because when you build when you build a lot of money in LEDs, like grabbed a lot of attention. Jungle Boy started following me. Like a lot of big notoriety pages started following me because of me copying your lights.
Well, I mean, if you
No, don't
think
get me
about
too-
it, so
I mean,
you're at 1,200.
You did
I
something.
only made them because I saw them in your basement.
Yeah, but you
so-
did something really novel, and the photography was excellent. It was, like I said, the,
Yeah.
the Star Trek Enterprise or the
Yeah.
big Star
And I wish
Wars
it was still up.
destroyer,
We had to
like-
archive all of it because Instagram's a
So I
little.
mean, that's what I'm saying. You think about it. He was probably at like at least 2,200 micromoles to the canopy per 5x5.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that. You know, you got 2.47 square meters on a 5x5. So he was well over 1,000 micromoles
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
And nobody was hitting those numbers. Not even with DE over a 25 square feet.
Right.
You're not hitting that.
Well, I had four 1,000 watt bless you. I had four 1,000 watt single endeds in there prior, and I had done 1.6 pounds per lamp. I did 2.7 pounds per lamp with the LEDs.
Nice.
So that was like about a 600 gram per quadrant increase, which I can't express to you how much going from like 40 grams a square foot to 70 grams a square foot changes everything in your world as a
absolutely.
grower.
And then-
Everything.
And
God,
then-
this
and
is a
so-
brilliant segue into our actual
Yeah, that's what
topic, too.
Yes.
I was going to say. So
Yes.
if you think about it, you think about that 1,000 micromoles threshold
Yeah.
that you hit, and then all of a
Which
sudden,
everybody wants or thinks they want or thinks they need or thinks they have
until
to
they
have.
realize what it takes to keep.
yeah, exactly. So what I'll say is 1,000 micromoles is absolutely
What do you
something
mean when you
can
say
grow.
1,000 micromoles?
So-
Be very specific.
So 1,000 ppfd, we'll say
averaged out across the top of your
photosynthetic
canopy
photon
at
flux
the plant
density.
level.
Okay.
So that would be the amount of. So if you were to buy a quantum sensor like from
Apogee, MQ.
or the MQ series,
You can
from
get a Pulse
Apogee.
Pro. The Pulse Pro is actually very comparable, within 2% of an Apogee MQ 500.
Oh, yeah. What's that coupon code if someone wants to buy it?
Wolverine at checkout on
There you go.
pulsegrow.com.
Love the guys at Pulse.
There you go.
So just to be explicitly clear, when we talk about PPF, photosynthetic photon flux, we're talking about just the photon,
Total.
the invisible to our human eye,
Yep.
photon particles
There's
that just
PPF coming out right
blast
here.
out.
Yep.
It's like you put your thumb over a water hose, and that waters the PPF. It
Yes.
has no
It's
other
the
metric,
volume.
no
It's
dis,
the
it's just the
volume. Yes.
volume, right? So when you put the D on the end, that you're describing a square
A
meter
specific
Yes.
measurement.
specific-
So so basically you can think of PPF as like this is 12, 16 ounces of something, right? So
Yes.
you have a
Splashed
volume.
out.
So you have a volume. That's PPF.
Yes.
That's a measurable total amount. Now, if I'm to pour that out, now I can say this is 16 ounces over, and it spills out over a 4x4 area. Then I can describe there's an ounce per square foot.
Yes.
So you
And-
see what I'm saying? So
and
that's
if-
what you're looking at.
And a good analogy, also, like if you're using an MQ, like an apogee to measure, let's say this area between Brian and I is your grow area. Let's just call it a 4x4 for argument's sake. You want your canopy to be flat like a table anyways. You're hopefully staggering your plants, trimming, lollipopping, topping. So let's say this is our canopy. The light's about 18 inches higher. When you're measuring, you don't want to come in here like this, and you don't want to come in here just all like this. What you want to do is take 5 measurements, and I've done this over the years to figure out what my average is. You take a measurement in the center, and then in the 4 corners, except you're going to leave this as flat as possible over your canopy so that it can actually get a real measurement on what your canopy's seeing from that light, because just tilting your device this way could change by as much as 15% reading. And only taking the center, you're going to have a skewed idea of how much light you have in your room, because if you walk in a 20 light room and you just measure, you have 3 rows, you take the center row, the center plant, and you just measure there, and you're like, yeah, I'm at 1400 ppfd, bro. But then I come in your room and I'm like, well, you're at 520, 610,
That's
740,
exactly right.
910. And then I start showing you, you're actually only at about 1,000, not 1,400, and you have a hot spot now. So I would just say when you're taking measurements at home so that you can compare to the data we're about to give out shortly, measure across your canopy. Take multiple points and try to hold it as flat as possible, is in the most level area of your canopy. And then if you have a higher area, you can measure that as well, and you'll see that the closer you get to that light, you're going to start getting into drastic changes in the plant's morphology, and I think that's what we're going to talk about here soon, because when you start getting into 14, 15, 1600 ppfd, just because you can doesn't mean you should, and there's a lot of things that, like genetics, that will keep you from ever being able to be successful at that level of intensity, and we can, I guess, start getting into that part now.
Exactly. So
If you have a trellis over your plants, like let's say you're in week 1 or whatever, you're going to have the trellis up a little higher. That's a really convenient grid.
Yeah.
That kind of helps you align and stuff like that.
Yeah.
too.
So that was something that we, so I just got back
Triple
from,
trellis for sativas and OGs.
Yeah.
Triple
So
trellis.
Yeah,
Yes.
three layers.
So I just got back from California and had visited several commercial grow operations, and that's something I noticed.
Did you visit the 3-light guys? Or can I
That
not
was
talk-
in.
Do we need
that
to
was,
edit that out?
yeah. So there actually be maybe Brian and I will maybe doing a remote remote show with those guys. So,
Perfect grower.
Yeah, yeah. So cool cats, real
Yeah.
cool cats.
Yeah.
But so something that I noticed
Schwaz.
with the schwazing, but it was something that I noticed when I was out there was with these DEs and these guys. If they did try to run them a little too close, the evenness was not really there, and the quality was
bag
poor,
appeal goes
and it
down
was terrible.
so bad.
But then some of the guys that were running them high enough, that's the big thing I noticed with those smaller reflector DEs, and even the wider ones, because what they consider wide, is still like maybe 16 inches or something versus 12. What I noticed was, you get under that light, you might get up to 800, 900 micromoles, but then you start moving away and you get out to the edge of the, before where they're overlapping, you're down to 500 or 600. And that's something I've noticed that with our lights, and other LEDs, is these bar lights, especially, they're almost just touching
It's
everywhere.
like a cliff.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a waterfall, that's what your Ppfd does. It just goes.
Yeah,
I've seen corners on bar lights, single bar lights in an open space, not a tent. I've seen corners at as low as 88.
Yeah,
ppfd
and
on the
that's-
corner.
and that-
And go to your bathroom and just turn on the mirror that you do your makeup or your hair in, and it's probably higher than 88. Like 88 is low.
Yeah, and that's something I noticed. And so when we went in, so these guys here we're talking about, the 3-light guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they did this, test light agreement, and then they turned around and they got the room full of 650Rs, and they got them on 4.5 by 4.5 centers, but they're running them about 30 inches off the canopy. There wasn't a space that I could measure that was under 1,100 micromoles in that entire canopy, and that was the thing they were saying was they could not believe.
And that's last year's light or 2 years ago?
Yeah,
design?
exactly. So you take this, so these new lights like the 750R and
I mean, this new. I saw the Ppfd grid for this new light. I don't know if it's released yet, but my goodness.
oh
They are
yeah,
always- actually, can we, as a quick aside, can we take a quick moment to just, you mentioned the old model, and the new models. The new models are all out for HLG, right?
They're on the
behind us.
website for
yeah,
sure.
so
on the website.
everything's out, and there's other things in the pipeline,
Right.
But so all the new models to the older lights are out. So
Yes.
the upgrades.
There's been a revamp.
So revamp. So 650 and 600 went to 700, 750. So basically their chassis got stretched. They got internal and external reflectors, which increased the light to the canopy around 12%.
Because you
over the
mentioned when you built
previous-
your first Cobb prototype, you're used to light going down like this, and now
Yes.
it's going out like that. Because
Yes.
the light emission angle on most of these mid-power dives is only 160 degrees, right?
So how they describe it is it's a 120 degree beam angle, right? And so you think, oh, what's 120 degrees? Should be good. Even the Cobbs. Well, it's 115, 120, full width half max. You'll see this FWHM. That means full width half max. That means at full width, 120 degrees, it's at 50% intensity, but it's still 50%.
Yeah.
So it still is a natural 180 degree.
I was going to say there's 5% up here still.
Yeah,
There is
but
light.
So what we did basically is the reason I'm a proponent of reflectors and not optics is because, okay, so in that 120 degrees, I don't need to correct anything, which is about 75, 80% of the total light output of that LED. I don't need to correct it. If I shot it through a lens, so you have something called refraction. So you're shotting straight down, you're okay. But when you start getting off that straight down and you start going like, 15 degrees, 20 degrees. There's a chance with PMMA, which is plexiglass, right? With this one common material, and you have PMMA, and you have what's the other one?
Low iron glass is used.
Well,
oftentimes.
low iron glass helps, but PMMA, you have. Well, there's 3 or 4 different plastics.
The phenomenon you're talking about is if you take a stick and put it in a lake, the stick isn't straight anymore.
Right.
Under the water, right? That's refraction to a certain extent.
Yeah.
That's what it
so
looks
what
like.
happens is a certain percentage of that light's going to bounce back off, right? Yeah. And the steeper the angle, the higher the incidence that it's going to bounce.
So your argument is by putting an optic over an LED, 100% of those photons have to pass through it. So whereas with this design, like a lot of those diodes aren't even interacting with the reflector.
So you've ever seen somebody, you buy eyeglasses and they tell you there's this stuff called anti-glare coating.
Yeah.
Right?
Anti-scratch resistant.
So this anti-glare coating can be put on your so plastic, it's harder. Mm-hmm. And it can be done. But to add it to an optic, like so at one time, you remember the QB96, I looked at doing a piece of plexiglass this big over, and I said, okay, I'm going to cut it up and I'm going to put this anti-refractive coating on there.
It's staggeringly
a piece
expensive.
This big,
with
the anti-reflective coating was $25 effing.
Yeah. At my old company, we offered the anti-glare and the non-anti-glare. Our cost, now we had to pay like $5 or $10 for the mold, but our basic glass lens cost us like $1 or $2 or whatever. Our AR coated one, $19 our cost.
Yes,
we sold them for $20 to the customer. We made $1 on that, and even
so
then they
AR,
had sticker shock.
So you to make the optic worthwhile, you got to put AR, which when you start looking at covering 6 quantum boards like that, or
it'd be half the cost of the light.
Yeah. So just cost prohibitive. So how do I correct the light that I need to correct and not mess with the other, and still have actually a higher overall system, or let's just say optical efficiency that's higher than even an anti-refractive, and that's reflectors, right?
Yeah.
So these reflectors are actually, so we got software that we actually computer designed the angles that these are that, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it simulates how those photons bounce off. So what I did was I actually push, if you look at these angles, we got reflectors on the inside, we actually push the photons out towards the outside edge. So you would think, oh, it's all going down. That's not true.
No.
So when you look at the new power maps, the outside actually got brighter, and the inside is actually just a tinge lower.
Which is
because you're stopping that overlay.
Right.
So we pushed it out.
Right. Board 6 over here is no longer contributing as many photons to the center.
Yes. So it actually.
Which, by the way, from someone who takes a lot of measurements, that fixes some problems.
Yes.
Because you get your whole canopy dialed to 1100, but then that center is always 12 to 1250.
Right.
Having it at 11 to 1150 is going to be a much better bag of
so
fuel
that 12
across the
that
room.
12% increase is actually realized more on the outside than even on the inside. So
I'm excited to put these.
So
in
what
use,
what it did was that, and Migro, he just released a video on Instagram, and the other one should be uploaded by the time this video is live.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for Migro.
Yeah,
he keeps it very professional.
He keeps it professional. He's a
even
guy.
though he sells his own
product.
He still
he
keeps
seems
it
very unbiased.
Brand
and that's good.
Agnostic.
Yep, that's
now,
great.
does he have $1 million lab with an integrating sphere and a CNC goniometer? No, but what he
he's
has
consistent.
Is a consistent test bed.
Yes.
So is his number the perfect number that you would get at CSA Group or whatever? No, probably not. But it's the same that he used to test these guys and that guy's.
Well, it's within the margin of error. It's good
just
enough.
like getting a Ppfd meter app on your phone, where it's not accurate. But hey, if you're using your same phone and your same app to test all your lights, it's accurate to itself.
Are you testing the definition difference between accuracy and precision? And I can't remember. One of them is the values agree with each other. The other one is it agrees with the theoretical. I can't remember. Chat, what's the difference between accuracy and precision? Please Google it and type it in our comment section.
Well, I can tell you this. I got by with an app for 3 years until I forked out the $550 for an Apogee. And the Apogee was only the Apogee was actually only 8% off from the app.
But I bet you still own that Apogee meter.
Oh, I have 2 of them.
So Migro got a hold of one of our new Scorpion Diablos, the SDX. Oh, here we go. Accuracy refers to how closely a measurement is true or accepted value. So that'd be like if it's 78 degrees outside and the meteorologist says it's 78, it is 78. Precision refers to how close the measurements of the same item are to each other. So that would be like your thermometer is very consistent within itself, even though it might actually only be 75 degrees and not 78. Okay, back to Migro. Migro got a hold of the SDX, Scorpion Diablo, right? And he tested it. I haven't seen the video yet.
So he tested it, and of course it tested out to be the most efficient, real world usable. So what he does is he measures how much photons, again, we're talking about Ppfd, hits a canopy in a 5x5 reflective area. He'll do a 4x4 or 5x5, depending on a couple things, like the request of the company, but then also, and what their recommended usage is, but also, bigger lights, you probably, like the Scorpion Diablo, you don't want to put that in a 4x4 on wide.
No,
it's just too much.
even at a low setting, it's just too powerful. Now, one thing about MyGrow, before we move from him, is like many companies, you'll send off to an independent third-party spear that's calibrated. Other companies may have the funding to do an in-house spear, which take that for what you want. It's in-house. Flash test, look them up.
It's a very expensive sphere to get you would need a 6-foot diameter sphere.
There are a couple companies that make in-house claims and have bought one, but I mean they're in-house claims. So
Everbright.
Yeah,
But
but the fun part about what you're saying with MyGrow is a spear is going to pick up the total light that this light puts off in a 360 degree. What MyGrow does is he takes only what's making it to the 5x5 area that your plants will be in. So he's not testing it's
what he calls usable.
The wall.
Yeah. It's of no relevance to his test.
It's no relevance to the plants.
Which is honestly more accurate in a way than not more accurate, but more precise. It's more precise and more usable to someone like me than even a spear result. Like an in-house spear from some company doesn't do as much as that.
Yeah, so the way I like the analogy guy, so the analogy to me is you can put your car on a dyno and you can take a Supra and it's making tons of boost, 50 pounds of boost. It's 1,500 horsepower, and you see this no torque, big spike, and then it runs a 10-second quarter mile. Yep. And then you can take a Corvette that has a huge torque curve, and it only made 600-700 horsepower, and it turns an 8-second quarter mile.
Yep,
sure. So it's applied power versus theoretical power.
Yes. Okay.
There's your difference.
Yep.
So I think that's the way I look at it. So I think a lot of the lights you could call them a sphere queen, it looks
a sphere queen, like the guy in the jacked up 4x4 that can't make it out of a small goalie.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's the thing. So it looks good in an integrating sphere, but does it actually perform? So that was the direction we went. So of course,
and from what I heard out of all his tests, the new Scorpion Diablo X is the highest efficiency on canopy of any light he's tested in any category.
Ever.
So it won.
And so we held that
number one.
We held that title for a long time. A competitor.
Yep.
Had a like design and usurped us by which they changed the test parameters. They moved the fixture around a little bit, a few things, and they aced out the test by 0.03 or something.
Yeah, but they had to add 2 more boards.
Well, it wasn't.
They did what's called in the industry throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
And
I'd love to see the margins.
There was a problem, but so there was no problem. But the biggest thing was when they did this design, and there was a reason I didn't do that design. It wasn't that I didn't think of it. It's because
the law of diminishing returns.
Well, no, it's so everything in these things are in series or in parallel series wiring. So when you start with pairs of boards, that's a series. So I put those together, and now the driver is dividing by 3. 1, 2, 3. So 200, 200, 200. Say in a 600 watt scenario. Remember, we got a center hotspot. I've got 66% of my power on the outside of my light where it belongs.
Right.
If you make 4 series and you start looking at it, you got 50% on those outside and 50% towards that inside. It makes it less even. Yeah. And most people don't even realize that. It makes it worse.
I see.
That was the reason I looked at doing and I was like, no, I got to spread it away. Unfortunately, you couldn't just do 4 because it won't overlap that far if you get it any. So at 30 inches, you could do just 2. You could do 2 350s and kill it.
That makes sense to me. So hypothetically, if someone put a gun to your head and said you're only allowed to sell 8 board designs in HLG. You have to get rid of 6 board. You had to do 8 board to achieve the same uniformity as this
It would have to
current light.
become a 40-something inch wide
You'd
fixture.
either need to make the light massive, or the middle boards would have to be half the width.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you
instead of
said
a
8,
8.5,
if you said 8, what I would do is I would run those 4 boards in parallel or in series and create and they would be half voltage boards.
Diminish
They would be
the
different.
power in the
They would
center.
be,
Yeah, okay.
and they would
Yeah.
still become 66%, 33.
Yeah, to keep that even spread.
Yeah.
But to now go back to the topic,
1,000 micromoles.
1,000 micromole today, I will say this. So before we get into how to set up your environment to be able to handle said micromoles, there are theoretical maxes put in place, and a great analogy would be bodybuilding, for example. So you have different genetics in different plants. Let's take GMO, which is a notorious 84 to 90 day plant. That is a 11 to 12 week strain versus the more common 8 to 9 week or 7 to 8 week popularly used in cannabis. So let's go with Zookies, which is an 8 week, GMO, which is let's call it 12 week for this purpose. GMO will foxtail, it will throw potential nanners, it will start growing awkwardly, anything above 950 for a period of more than 12 hours.
And that makes sense.
So DLI comes into effect here because I run an 1113 so that I can push a slightly higher Ppfd because I'm running less hours on, more hours off, so I can cram a little bit more Ppfd. And so my numbers might be higher than yours should be if you're running a 1212. But to this point of the GMO, anything above 950 on a 1212 will start actually messing up the plant. Well, that plant is supposed to be in flower for 12 weeks. So that means that its DLI is going to be extended for an extra 30 days,
it's
right?
absorbing more
It's taking
photons.
30 days longer than the Zookies to finish its flower duration. That's something I think a lot of people overlook here. So if you take Zookies, Alien Labs consistently runs Zookies at above 1,300 micromole on canopy. Now, you're wondering, well, how can you buy one clone or one seed that can push 1,300 and look perfect in the bag, but then ruin a plant at 1,000 or higher if a different strain? Well, I've noticed that the strains that typically finish faster have a higher tolerance to Ppfd, and the strains that finish longer have a lower tolerance to
So
Ppfd.
they have a higher metabolism or a,
And-
well, let's just say
but
they
if you
have-
do
I think it goes
So
back
I
to their
think-
landrace heritage
Right.
and where geographically
Yeah,
they're from.
how much
If you look
natural
at,
exposure they would have
GMO
gotten.
would be this long daylight plant where the sun isn't like at a peak intensity for very long because it's a 16-hour day.
Yep.
Whereas like a Zookies or something, if you look way deep in
10 hours of just cram.
boom,
Yeah.
sun's here and then
14
yeah.
hours of darkness, yeah. So taking their natural origins, which is their genetical profile, genetics, that's, to me, what you need to think about before you start changing your environmental parameters. Because do some research, ask around, ask your buddy who you got the cut from, what he runs it at, ask what another guy runs it at, because there's a lot of strains that you'll actually yield less with more light. Because it will actually stress the plant out.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And as we get into different strains, like you guys are able to do a lot of CBD testing, and I'm sure CBD probably reacts slightly different to a lot of the THC plants.
It's the same thing though.
You
So
know.
the CBD strains are just low THC. You got land races, you've got sativas, you've got indicas.
But I'm sure
it's
you guys
all,
can see some strains
Oh,
can handle over
yeah.
1,000, and some
Yeah,
strains are like,
yeah.
no,
Yeah.
this isn't
So,
well.
yeah.
What I've seen is so far is that the hemp is interesting, and it's all cannabis sativa,
Yep.
cannabis indica. So people ask me, "Well, you're not even growing cannabis." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I am. It's the
Same
same
pH,
genus and the
same
same
temperature, yeah.
Everything
It's the
is the
same
same.
everything.
Yeah.
It's basically THC weed
Yeah.
from 1965.
I just wasn't sure
know.
if your guys were seeing the same
We do.
variants.
The ones
Okay.
that are closer to what I would call a field hemp variety, which actually kind of look and resemble a GMO, those ones typically cannot take the light. It is the ones that like we grow one called a lemon cheese, and that one was provided to me by Flow Gardens,
Shout out Flow
flowgardens.com
Gardens.
for all your high-end hemp and CBD. Lemon cheese it looks like a Skittles or something like that, and it's short and it's stocky, and you could tell by its leaves. They got the little round leaflets.
Indicas can take the light,
You
boy.
can blast it, dude, all day.
Now, so we started this preface to say, like, shout out Flow Gardens, But I just wanted to drive that point home because some of my best yields might have come from my crops where I was running 1,300 ppfd or 1,200. But I can tell you in a room of GMO, my best crops came at 850 to 900 ppfd on an 1113, which when you DLI track that is pretty low. 900 on 11. It's pretty low, but it was the best yield I ever got. I actually was able to hit 3 light with GMO.
Absolutely
and
agree.
there's also something to the 11-13. So when we start talking about shortening the daylight hours and increasing the dark hours, so what we're doing is at times it depends on strain dependent again, but if you can increase that intensity during those shorter periods, and you can get those extra hours of the time off, so the plant does something called, it produces something called florigen once it's in its sleep state. That's the flowering hormone. The longer you can build up that florigen, there is the chance that you can shorten your flower time, because as long as you're not shortening the amount of total photons it's absorbing, or DLI, per 24-hour period,
your PPFD to
then
account
you can
for that
actually
shorter
make
hour.
it build florigen, which will tell it, the days are getting shorter, my life is going to end, it's winter, I need to hurry up and reproduce. So it can fast forward and make those strains finish just a little faster than 12-12.
And in most cases it will. Speaking from experience, I switched to 11-13 in 2017, so I did my last 5 years of growing with 11-13 primarily in all my spaces. It also helped with electrical costs and whatnot, and timing of my schedule. But in doing so, I've noticed that I've maintained the same DLI. So I raise my PPFD by anywhere from 60 to 100, but I take an hour off. But by giving the plants the longer sleep time, my 62-day that I take pictures every harvest, and I see when the trichomes turn amber, I see when the pistils turn orange, I see that knuckled out calyx when it's like finally swollen, all of that. It'll be day 57 instead of day 60. So I actually have noticed all my strains over the last 5 years finish 2 to 3 days faster than whoever gives it to me. If my buddy says, hey, this cut always 65 days. At 62, I'm like, you can't take it any longer. It's going to go bad. Because it's done. It's done by 62.
Yes,
it's right.
it.
And
if you'll allow me real quick.
Yeah, please.
Just for the people that maybe aren't familiar with some of this terminology, like DLI stands for daily lighting integral, and an integral is just a calculus equation that can calculate many things, but like area under a curve or whatever. So you got.
Would you like me to give the equation?
Sunrise. Yeah. Go. I mean, well, just tell the people. Well, we got to define what DLI is, and maybe could you provide an analogy as to how the plant gets everything it needs in just 11 hours and not 12 in the daylight? Yeah.
So as he was saying, daily light integral refers to the total amount of light that a plant receives over the course of a day. So what you would do to find this is you take your PPFD, which we've been mentioning, photosynthetic photon flux density, use your apogee meter, figure out what your average PPFD is. Then you're going to do PPFD divided by 0.0036 times the hours on. Now I shortcut that. The real one is PPFD times 60 times 60, because there's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. So PPFD times 60 times the amount of hours your lights are on. So let's say 12 in this scenario, divided by 1,000,000. Now,
okay, so PPFD times 3,600, which is the amount of seconds in an hour.
Yep.
Then what? So
the hours on.
Then times your hours on.
Yep.
And that gives you the total amount of light. Right, because PPFD is photons per second.
Yes.
So it needs to be so you need your units, right?
So you have to have PPFD, and you have to have the total amount of hours it's receiving.
If we did this on a whiteboard, you remember
it would be so much easier.
Your math professor always says you got to watch your units. So if you're going to have seconds.
Even easier, you can go to HLG.com and go to calculator, and it'll give you, and you just type in your PPFD, and it'll give you DLI.
But I just wanted to put context that there is a formula you can go find, and it refers to the seconds in a minute, the minutes in an hour, the amount of light you have on, the PPFD, and you can get the equation, and let's say it's 40 or 42.37. Well, now you know that, okay, at 1,000 PPFD, 12 hours on, I'm getting about 42. Well, if I'm going to go to 11, and at this PPFD, I'm only going to get 39. So I need to make up 3 DLI. So I'm going to need to go up 50 to 100 PPFD for every hour that it's on to get the same DLI. Once you've hit that same DLI, you're going to get the same yield. Don't let anyone fool you into thinking that less hours is going to take away your yield. I can speak from experience.
Actually, episode 6, I'm going to be like Steven Crowd. I'll be like, 12-12 is my jam. Change my mind.
Then I'll do it.
Analogy boy. I got an analogy for you, right? So as a human, you are going to consume 2,000 calories. A big meaty guy like you might need 3,000, but let's just talk about the mere mortals. 2,000 calories in a day. So the 11-13 DLI argument is that I'm a 12-12 human. I'm going to consume these calories very spread out. I'm going to have a scone with my coffee. I'm going to have a mid-morning, egg white.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Taco Bell for lunch because I've been good all day. Then I'm going to have a snack when I get home from work. Then I'm going to have my
buttered
It's
croissant.
all spread out.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're taking away the croissant.
Yep.
And you're taking away the end.
And I'm having 2 extra Coca-Colas in that.
But
you're
packing your 2,000 calories. You're just doing it less. So you're still getting the same nutrition in shorter time.
So there was.
What'd you think of that analogy?
So it's great.
Okay, good.
So there's
It kept him awake. It's about bodybuilding.
So there's a bodybuilder, Serge Nubert was his name. If you ever want to look it up, so he was from South Africa, and he said he liked to eat like the lions. So he would eat. I don't remember. It was maybe 3 to 5 pounds of beef in a single setting. Jesus. And this dude was fucking ripped. And this is before anabolic steroids. Yeah. So he was jacked. And he ate 1 time a day, but he would eat all his calories right there. 1 time. And this dude was ripped. No shit.
You heard it here
Look him up. It's
123 is the new 1113.
Yeah, it's like 123, and you just do 10,000 ppfd. Yeah.
Well,
what we'll do is we'll just hit them with lasers. And that's it. Done.
So Bruce Bugby has actually done some testing and science around this. I don't want to start throwing out crazy numbers because I won't be able to quote him here. You can look up all these.
I think Migro just had him on. You could go check out his channel for our review and that interview.
Nice. So I think on the Apogie's YouTube page, he goes over plant, Ppfd, PAR, all that stuff. Well, they did some testing that above 1,600 Ppfd, which I know we're in a totally different world now, but above 1,600, they started to see diminishing returns.
Pretty diminishing returns,
so like up to 1,600, it actually did increase yield. Now, there was no study on quality. There was no study on bag appeal. There was no study on terpenes or THC. They were just talking biomass. So they wanted to see, if you increase CO2 in light, can you get more biomass? And the answer is up to 1,600 CO2 and up to 1,600 ppfd, you will see a relative increase in biomass.
Well, actually, it wasn't even 1,600 CO2. So he also...
Well, the stomata closes after 1,600.
Well, no, they had a new study. He said that they noticed that yield didn't decrease. I think it was 1,250 parts per million. Mm-hmm. There was no difference above that.
I can believe that. I can believe that. So I just know after 1,600, it is negligible, though. You'll actually go backwards.
Called the Redfield ratio. That's like carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus. It's applicable in like underwater photosynthetic organism, but I think the Redfield ratio applies. If the Redfield ratio applies, please comment down below.
Saltwater tank knowledge.
So I think if you go to Migro's channel, he does, in that interview, he does talk about, I think it is 1,250. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure it's 1,250.
I totally believe it.
And for me, if I'm buying that CO2 and I know I'm going to get the exact same meal at 1,250 versus 1,500, I'm running.
Well, the reason I believe it is I've been preaching. You can go on my page, look it up. The posts have been there for 3 years. 1,400 CO2 is my go-to in flour. The reason is because I used to do 1,600, then I realized I'm just wasting extra money.
Yes, yeah.
Now, for me, with your lights at 1,100 to 1,200 ppfd, I do need 1,400 CO2. Okay. And there's actually studies. If you go and type in Ppfd CO2 chart, it'll show you at 1,100 ppfd, 1,400 parts per million of CO2 is needed to metabolize the entire 1,100. And anything below 1,400 would be, a percentage thereof. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a white paper study done on non-cannabis species of plants. But what they're showing is as you increase ambient CO2, as you increase light intensity, the ambient CO2 is not enough to actually utilize that higher light intensity. And I think this is something we needed to talk about as well.
So I got to ask Bruce when we were in Vegas during cannabis conference. Mm-hmm. I did get to talk to him. And one of the questions I had for him was, I'd seen a study, and I'd actually looked at this under a microscope myself. If you veg your plants in a very low CO2 environment, there'll be more stomata per square inch of the leaf surface. And I thought that it would equate to they would be able to utilize more CO2. but it turns out that it's not the case. So that they don't need more.
That's really interesting. So there's a morphology change in the leaf under low CO2.
Yes.
And is that detrimental to then you're putting in, let's say like, well, let's just talk about me. I veg under like 400 ppfd. That's all I need. Yeah. Growth rates are great. Yeah. So the appropriate CO2 level is like 650 for that amount. So is that detrimental to me? Should I be running?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. So if you do,
well, because new leaves would have the new morphology, and when you flower, you get new leaves every day.
Well, what he told me was when you want to run elevated CO2 in veg, he said the plant will be hardier.
Okay.
So so we won't have any hollow stems.
412 pounds of CO2 delivered, and it was very expensive.
Yeah,
There's like a CO2 shortage
in
the country, like everything else.
CO2 shortage.
Well, go look at any grocery store right now. They don't have dry ice.
I'm trading in my electric car tomorrow, and I'm going to buy me a big gas guzzler then.
There you go. Well, Bill Gates, get on that.
So I just happened to pull it up real quick because I just wanted to double check myself here. So if you're at 400 ppfd, you only need 360 CO2 to metabolize that 400 ppfd.
Oh God, I'd need a time machine to go back to about 2002 when city's ambient CO2 was 350. Now a city's ambient's like 400 something.
But the point is, at that 400, ambient is plenty.
Okay.
But now when you get up to 800, you actually match it at a 800 CO2. So for those of you who are flowering in that 800, which is where we were getting to, if you're flowering at 800 ppfd, you only need 800 CO2 to metabolize that. Now watch how fastly this changes. If you jump from 800 to 900, you have to go to 1100 CO2. So at 800, and it's 800, but at 900, it's 1100. And at 1,000, it's 1,200, and at 1,100, it's 1,400. And that's where it stops.
So it's the carrying capacity of carbon. When you exceed that type of photon excitement, carbon has become a limiting reagent in photosynthesis above 800 ppfd.
And that's why if you're not supplementing CO2, you shouldn't bother going above 800 ppfd is about as high as you'd ever want to go.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
To date, and I've now turned out, I've harvested maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 plants this year alone.
Yeah.
But to date, in my entire 22-year growing career, my best crop was at 850 ppfd. With no CO2. Now, by best, I mean...
Well, was it in a basement of a house?
It was on the third floor of a townhome. Okay. By best, I'm not talking about the highest yield. I'm just talking about it was the most photogenic. It was the most sustainable.
But I bet you there was...
All the petioles
the CO2
were
is probably higher than 400.
Yeah,
if you're in there breathing, it's probably
you're
7.
Probably right.
So
I'm just saying...
I used to have a meter in my basement.
Yeah.
So, and you would see about 400 to 450 in a basement. Yeah. Generally, with people living in the house.
Okay.
So...
and my grams per watt was the highest. I put the video on YouTube. It was like 2.78, almost 3 grams per watt. And I think it might have been... No,
was it only like 400 watts?
It was very low watt. It was about 400 watts per 4x4.
Because that number got me so jealous. I've never hit that number.
But with that said, all metrics, all the Ppene internet bragging metrics were amazing.
Yeah.
The flower was like a little loose. Yeah. Looked amazing. It was a little loose.
Well, so you think about like, I don't know if you remember Captain Morgan.
I do.
Captain Morgan on Roll It Up, right? Mm-hmm. So he would always run 600 to 700 micromoles, right? So he would run 4 cobs on a 240. Let's see, it was 4 cobs on a 240 driver in a 3x3. Which you start looking at watts per square foot. He would always bust over 2 grams per watt with cobs, always. And it was.
But then when you did the grams per square foot, that's when that metric fell apart.
Yeah, it fell apart. But for him,
I used to do that for a while. That 400 watt, and you get this great 2 pounds, and it's like cool, but 3.5 pounds is way better than 2 pounds in that same area. So
yeah. I mean, well,
the
that's
gram
true.
per watt was cool for a while.
Thicker wallet.
Yes.
Well, so for him though, I think it would be looking at it like it was all for personal consumption.
Yeah.
And he was a retired man, and he was on a very fixed income. So for him, he ran a couple 3x3s and would spread that out versus because his electric bill actually mattered to him, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's But what I admired about it was the quality of the flower, because the plant wasn't just being. Now it may have been looser, like you was talking about, but as far as quality, when the terpenes and stuff, because it wasn't being hammered by all that radiation and stuff like that. It was next level.
Well,
man. It really
so now that we've realized that, okay, CO2 is needed to operate above 900.
800, plus.
And
And that's a non-starter for some people.
Yeah, a lot of people just turn their lights all the way up though. Like I know people that have bought these and then 8 inches off the canopy, full tilt, day one of flower. And
that's
I'm like,
very dangerous, because the type of people that do that, not only do they lack CO2 supplementation, they lack it usually due to financial resources, so they don't even have CO2 monitoring. And what you see in rooms like that is you'll see baseline 400 ppm and anywhere in any city, give or take, you'll see it sucking down to 100, 150.
Their plant's struggling to stay alive in there,
If CO2 levels go below 150 parts per million,
you're not getting
the
yield.
plants can, in many strains, become completely elastic and just give up on life.
Yeah.
And you'll come into a room and it looks like they just
It's like they've been suffocated almost. Yeah.
So you remember that those pictures I sent you of the guy that was testing out the lights that had the problem with the top buds
Yes,
versus the lower?
I do.
The CO2 broke. It got down to 30.
Yeah, because those plants were healthy and they sucked all the...
So they got down to 30. So the lights he was running, he was at 600 ppfd, and we were at 1300. Ours just collapsed. It just collapsed, man. And
well, that's what we were talking. Living in the fast lane, there are things that when you go above 800, you now have to feed different. You have to have CO2. You have to have a different... Oh, we didn't even talk about leaf surface temperature. My goodness. So when you're trying to utilize CO2 in order for that CO2 to actually be effective, your leaf surface temperature has to be warmer. If you have a 73-degree leaf surface temperature, I don't care if you put 1400 CO2 or no CO2, it's not going to have an effect on it because it's not going to be able to absorb it. So
and that's just
transpiration isn't happening.
Yeah.
Metabolic heat.
So don't waste CO2.
Or is it heat required for faster metabolism, or is it transpiration rate? What does the leaf surface temperature affect?
I believe it would be more for metabolism, because what they're stating is 82.6 is the white paper studied perfect leaf surface temperature to absorb 1400 CO2. The reason I memorized 82.6 is because I ran at 1400 CO2, so I only did the research on what I needed for my rooms. So my goal in veg and early flower was to have a leaf surface temperature of 82 to 83 degrees. And I would accomplish that by having an ambient room temperature of about 84 to 86, which seems very high to people, but an HPS is going to have UV and IR that's going to spit out heat onto your plant.
Mostly
and your
UV,
plant
IR,
is and your plant is going to absorb that heat and hold on to it. So if you were to take if you were to take a laser and measure your wall, because your thermostat says 77, your wall might be 77. You go check that plant on the side, might be 81. You check it right underneath that light, might be 84. Well, now you're seeing the center of my plant 7 degrees warmer than the air that it's around. Okay, well, now you swap out that light and you go to an LED and you run the same 77. You're seeing the same 77 on the wall, so you imagine things have got to be the same, right? Well, go check, because your plant isn't receiving that infrared now, but it is still transpiring. You have 68-degree feed that you just put in the root zone. It's drinking it, cooling itself off, and transpiring it. So those leaves are probably 2 to 3 degrees below the ambient.
Right. Because what happens? So you think about a real easy analogy to understand why that's happening. Everybody in the world's used rubbing alcohol at some point on their hands somewhere, right? It feels cold. So as things evaporate, remember so molecularly, it's absorbing ambient energy. It's absorbing heat. So when water evaporates or you have transpiration, it takes away heat. Right. So that's what's happening. As it's transpiring, it's actually literally absorbing the heat that is coming down on it. So the leaves are always going to be slightly cooler than, if you have no infrared, than the ambient air. You know what I mean? In a transpiring plant.
And so that's why this is so important when you make the transition, because a lot of guys have bought really nice LEDs and then swapped and then said, I did half as good as I did with HPS. And I'm wondering, well, I saw your equipment. What were your environmental parameters? And then they showed me, and I realized, okay, so when your room used to be 77, your plant was actually 82, which guess what? That's the sweet spot. So kudos for figuring that part out. But now you ran it at 77, and your plant was 75. Well, if you go look at the CO2 absorption, 75 isn't going to absorb even half of the CO2 an 82-degree plant will. So you're not going to be able to metabolize as much growth per day. You're not going to get the same yield. So in order to do that, you need to know what was your leaf surface temperature with HPS Are you happy with it? Did you see the yields you wanted? Because maybe it was wrong to begin with, but 82 is about what you want to shoot for if you're supplementing CO2. And then now we're going to get to the important part, greed. The plants will continue in week 4, 5, 6, and 7 to grow at an alarming rate if you keep the leaf surface temperature at 82. However, what will happen is you put yourself at an increased risk of bud rot, mold, and honestly just terpene damage. Your terpenes are going to be basically evaporating at that point, because by week 5 you should have a very resinous plant, and 83 degrees is kind of volatile for those. So what I would suggest is slowly tapering down as you get into the weeks. On my Instagram, I actually have a week by week from week 1 through 9 showing exactly what ambient temperature, leaf surface temperature, Ppfd, CO2, pH, and EC I use. And these took years to come up with these numbers and get them dialed into the way that I do it. But I change my temperature, my CO2, and my Ppfd basically from week to week. Now, there are arguments to be made about that. I could make it a lot easier on myself and just kind of pick a medium and just say 80 degrees and just kind of leave it there. But I'm into yield and I'm into quality. So I like to maximize my growth in veg in week 1 through 3 of flower. And then I like to really bulk safely in week 4, 5, and 6. And then I throw all yield out the window for week 7, 8, and 9. And I go low temperature, low humidity, low CO2, low Ppfd,
Well, so
and I'm just
that's the
locking
thing,
in those knuckles.
Well, that's the thing, too. So when you start talking about you're doing the lower humidity, so humidity can also help the plants transpire harder, which will bring in some of that stuff. Low humidity will make them dry out. So that will kind of keep your transpiration rate up, even though you've actually turned down the temperature. So that's good. But the problem is you don't want to run low humidity all the time for a few reasons. Spider mites, right? They're like, give me some dry air, and
but if you're not starting to lower until day 50, they're not gonna out of thin air. They're not gonna creep up. If from a healthy plant at day 50, they're not going to become.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I haven't seen spider mites since my cousins grow.
That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you keep a continually low humidity
area, if you weren't monitoring your environment and you were just running like 80-40 forever, you'd probably have a pretty bad pest problem by now.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Humidity is not always a bad thing. But so more to this point, I could honestly spend like 4 to 5 hours talking about this part of this subject. So I'm trying to think of what to trim out. Yield is not as easy as it sounds, but it's easier than it sounds. So once you understand what's been holding you back, or what the issue was or what you were lacking, it's actually pretty easy to get a high yield. Now, getting quality is a learning curve that I think takes experience. I think it's a little harder to nail a quality product than it is to nail a lot of it. And that's what we're going to learn with as you get into flower, lowering that light intensity, because greed had me going for a while, and I thought, let me just keep these at 82 degrees, 1200 ppfd, 1400 CO2 all the way to the end, and I'll feed them 3 EC, and I'll just keep
pumping biomass.
And I was growing forearms, like 2-liter bottles, but then they were sitting around for 2 or 3 months. I'd have these bags of just boof sticks that nobody wanted because they didn't have much smell. Yeah.
Well, so and that's the other thing too. So when we
that was greed, by the way. That was all greed.
So when we start looking at, when we start talking about quality and greed, so there's some speculation around CCTs when it comes to grow lights, right?
What does that mean?
Correlated color temperature, CCT, right? So.
And that's like what, the kelvins or?
Yeah, that's your kelvins. So you
like
got
your HID headlights and your Yukon in
5,000,
2008.
6,000 K, all this stuff, right? So that's number one, that's a human eye centric measurement. Again, it is weighted to the human eye perception. Right. So we don't see red like way over here in 670, 680 nanometer range. We don't see that very well. We don't see some of the really low 400s very well. So when you get down into these ranges, it doesn't change CCT as much as it should, even though there's a lot of it there, right? So there's been a misconception, a lot of people talking about
because the lab report turns back a CCT.
Yeah, CCT, but that is a human eye-centric measurement. It does not count in and grow in any way.
It's great for a flashlight or a headlight.
Yeah, any different, any more, CCT counts any more than if you were measuring lux. There's no difference.
I was going to say, in my 8 years of LED experience, I couldn't tell you, other than the ones I built, what the Kelvin rating on any light I bought
is.
It's
like
So-
paint, right? It's like if you took 20 different colors of paint and you mixed them all together, your CCT is brown.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, it's brown paint. Well, it's not brown paint. It's a little violet, a little cyan, a little. It's 30% this, but like when you need to come up with a metric for certification testing, et cetera, well, it's got to have that metric, but it doesn't specify.
So remember, anytime a lab tests something, they're testing from horticulture is a relatively new thing when it comes to testing lighting versus general lighting.
Yes.
So CCT absolutely matters
lighting,
because I want to know exactly when my office workers are here. I want a more crisp bluer light, so I want like a 5000K because they're more alert because blue light
is energizing and it keeps people happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
could I make the argument that if you're a manufacturer and your CCT comes out to 3,275, and this person is making a light and their CCT is identical, the plants, it looks the same color to us, right? Like
it can be totally different combinations of
right.
of
and the
spectrum to
plant
make
may
that.
respond
Totally
differently.
differently.
Yeah.
So
to this
what you got
light
to look
versus that
at,
light.
so the
Which
newer
took experience
metric
for you over these years in redefining these spectrums to get to this point, because this is not just a point and shoot spectrum.
No,
this is a dialed
If it was
spectrum.
point and shoot, we'd still be using 3500K cops.
So what we did, what we figured out, like I said, is really it's even more red, blue, green ratio.
Mm-hmm.
You need to start looking at that. How much red, how much blue, how much green. So yield wise, the science is in that they don't need a whole lot of blue. You need some blue, but you don't need a whole lot of blue. Like 6, 8, 10% is enough. We have 20% in our lights, and everybody says, "Well, if yield is 6%, that's your maximum yield. What in the hell are you doing?"
Quality.
The science is very much in terpene production.
Yes, sir.
Is much higher. So everybody looked at, HLG is going the wrong direction. They're going cooler with their lights. Yeah, except I did win the High Times Hemp Cup first place flower with that spectrum, and we beat out over 500 entrants. And the same year, with that same spectrum, we won the Emerald Cup first and second place. It could maybe mean that we might make some okay lights.
And I couldn't keep any of my 2021 or 22 harvests around for longer than a week
because the terpene
the bag
profile.
appeal, and this is so much learning has happened over the years. Like when I was greedy and trying to just push high yields, the quality was nowhere. Like I didn't even realize how good the quality could get back then. Now I will say that 1,000 ppfd on an 1113 or an 850 to 900 on a 1212 is probably going to be better in 9 out of 10 cases than going 13 or 1400 ppfd. So sometimes turning that light down, save you some money, pull it further away from the canopy. I know it seems counterproductive to have such a powerful light that can hit such crazy numbers, but at the end of the day, you have to figure out what strain are you growing, what are you growing for, what's your end goal, and how set up is the rest of your environment? Are you at 82 degrees? Are you supplementing CO2, and are you measuring how much CO2 you're supplementing? Are you feeding to counteract that? Is your medium transpiring? Are your roots growing? There's so many aspects to this yield thing, like more roots, more fruits. Like to me, it all starts in veg. Like this whole topic doesn't matter because if you put in plants that didn't veg very well, it doesn't really matter what the temperature and the CO2 is. You could be the most dialed in environment in the world, but if the plants aren't healthy, it really doesn't matter.
And that's the thing too, especially in this market today.
Yeah.
The wholesale price, we all know, is not the greatest in the cannabis industry right now. No. Not even close. So that quality difference can literally, you say your yield suffers 10 whole %. Because you didn't maximize that yield, you might get the price difference can be 50% less over quality in a second in this market.
Or it could be the difference of selling in the first week or still having the product 6 months later to where now you can't even sell it for half of the value you could have theoretically settled on up front, because now it's just old dirt, just
Cardboard
dusty.
terps.
There's nothing
what
to
I'm
it.
saying.
So I actually have encountered more of that this year than I have people like myself that are selling out. More and more people I've spoke with are running into just walls and walls full of just
Sending it off for extraction.
27-gallon totes. Yeah,
to get
distillate
something.
carts. Like guys that used to be the king of flour are now making distillate carts because
Out of
they just
indoor,
can't
out of
move
indoor.
them. And I have to tell you, this is not like an HPS bash or any bash against any style of lighting. What I will say is, you have guys who've learned their craft with what they have. So if you have a guy who's been growing HPS for 15 years, I hope he's getting a good yield and a good quality by now. He's had 15 years to
Most of
to
the people
perfect
are.
that.
Most of the people stay with it because it works for them.
Exactly. So this is in no way saying HPS cannot perform or deliver a great product. What we are saying is, if what you're considering as a great standard, let's just pick numbers here, 3 pounds per 5x5 area that test at 30% THC and 3% terps. We're keeping threes around. So 3 pounds, 30% THC, 3% terps. If we call that a grand slam in this industry, which for most it would be, and you can do that with 1,180 watts, which is what a double-ended Gavita actually draws from the wall at full power. It's like 1,173, 1,180. So 1,180 watts, or 717, I think, the newest Scorpion Diablo X from the wall. So 717. So here's where this wholesale conversation comes back full circle. If you're able to produce the same 3 pounds at 30% THC and 3% terps as your buddy with the double-endeds, but you're doing it with 720 watts versus 1180, well, I mean, I'm no mathematician, but it sounds like you're cutting almost a third of that wattage out of that equation, which is going to be less cost. Well, now you're also reducing your BTUs, which means less heating and less electrical needed for that. And by doing so, by switching to LEDs, you also are allowed to, guess what? Run a warmer room temperature, which means less HVAC working. So not only is there a lower BTU load, but now you have a higher temperature threshold, so there's less HVAC being used. I've done the long math. It's not 30%, it's not 40%, it's closer to 50% reduction in run costs by switching from a double-ended Gavita to a Scorpion Diablo, because of the environmental changes that you will be making and saving on, as well as the saved electricity, but you're still able to maintain, we're back to that 3 pounds, 30%, 3%. So if you're still hitting what this guy's hitting, except you're producing it for 60% or 50% of the cost that he's doing it, you're going to be able to stay in business twice as long, or survive at twice the margin.
Right,
so
even that.
So we're not saying like, hey, the best can't be done with HPS and the best. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, you're not going to beat an LED with an HPS on return on investment. You're just not going to. I can't find a scenario yet where it makes more sense as an owner of an establishment. If I have to buy a building and buy HVAC and pay the electric bill and pay staff, there's almost no scenario I've come across with as good as LEDs have gotten. Once we got to about that 2.6, 2.7 micromole per joule, that math really started to weigh in the LED side. And I think it was a learning curve in this community, and it still is, that more of us need to get out and talk about the parameters, the environment, the needs of what you have to do to successfully run with a high-powered LED. You know,
as we're getting closer to the end of the show here, can we just talk about some of the challenges, the hurdles to like even doing your strategy, right?
Sure.
I mean, I would say that getting the light is probably the easiest part now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah. So like
At
like
2.6, 2.8 micromoles?
Yeah. So if you're, let's be realistic. If you're hitting 2.7 micromoles per joule with a light, and it's okay. And again, there'll be a lot of, you got to watch. There's a lot of landmines out there where, unscrupulous companies will advertise that number and it not really be real. So resources like Migro are great because he's unbiased and he's doing these tests. So you can look at his list and you can go back to his videos, and at least this actually tested here. It's not what this guy says. You know what I mean?
And he measures on a table, not that dissimilar to this, more square than rectangle. But like if you have a table,
it's
you
just
could
a black gridded out table, and it's perfect.
All right, so you need a light, and you're going to spend like $700 or $1,000 anywhere, and you're going to have 1,000 micromoles or more.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's easy. I mean, it's a tough economy coming up with $1,000, but you're going to do this thing. You're going to spend like a couple $1,000 or whatever. Okay. So you got the light. You've got a room. Obviously, you wouldn't be growing. So sealing that room up is dozens of dollars, whatever you use, foil tape or sealing or Panda film, whatever you use.
Just buy a tent on Amazon.
A few dozen dollars, right? Okay. So then the other thing is we are talking about running a sealed room because you got to supplement the CO2, over 850, 900 micromoles. Okay. So you're going to definitely need CO2. So you sealed your room with $2 worth of saran wrap, cheap as you can. You got your $1,000 light, right? How do you add the well? You gotta add the CO2, so that's gonna be some cost. Maybe you can discuss that.
I can tell
and
you.
And then you're gonna have to.
I can tell you very.
You're gonna have to cool the room.
Well,
I don't care if you're in Alaska or Texas. If you're in a sealed environment with any, I mean, that's the laws of thermodynamics. You got to cool the room, right?
Well, for the hustlers doing it in a spare bedroom, check me out. So if you have central HVAC and you have one vent in that spare bedroom, and you're only running 2 LEDs. And your goal is to be at 83 degrees and the rest of your house is 76, you'd be surprised. You could probably get very close.
So you cool the room around the tent, but the tent stays sealed?
Yeah, with the CO2
Yeah, so
in
what you do is... So,
I mean, that's just one way to avoid the mini split. I'm just giving that out.
Yeah, so what you can do, too, is you'll end up wasting a little CO2 because you'll have the whole room kind of getting CO2.
Yep.
But what you can do is... Titan Controls makes a neat little switch that's called a Zypher 4. You plug that in, and it's a fan speed controller. You plug your fan in, and you set that temperature, and it's not cutting the fan on and off. See, that on-off shit is not good because if that fan, say that tent doesn't get warm, say you're in veg, enough to turn that fan on, you have humidity problems and
sweating,
mold and all kinds of stuff. But it will.
It's variable.
You can set your idle speed at the very minimum, so there's always just a little bit of air exchange, and then it speeds up and down on an analog style, not up down, but actually.
Okay. Can I one up you? Mm-hmm. AC Infinity.
So their new one's good.
God, their new products. Yeah. Shout out to AC Infinity. I mean,
except on the LEDs, they're shit.
They're what?
Except for the LEDs, they're shit.
Their LEDs are great. You buy our LEDs. But I'm telling you, customer service, the wholesale team, all of their fan products, their app is intuitive. It's free. Yeah. And it does all that cool ramp down stuff. You can set temperature, humidity parameters. You can set, if you need a 6 or an 8-inch fan, AC Infinity is the way to go.
But now, if we're talking back to the room
back
now.
to the cooling
so
room.
Let's go. This guy is putting 6 lights, so he can't use his house AC. What you'd want to do is you get a high efficiency mini split. So you're going to want to go with at 1 to 2 ton, like a Mitsubishi Fujitsu. You want to go with high efficiency.
Not a Pioneer or some Amazon special?
I wouldn't, speaking from experience.
Because the Pioneers, you can get in a firm 2 to 3 year warranty for, they're like $1,000 or $1,200. The warranty's like an extra $69 or $119, and the all the hoses and all the copper pipes and stuff are all vacuum sealed. So when you hook it all together, you don't need a HVAC.
Yeah,
it's all DIY.
Same with the Mitsubishi and Fujitsu. They come loaded fully.
I've noticed the SEER is lower on the DIY units.
Yes,
typically, which is a little weird.
So I like personally, I like 22 and above SEER. So, I mean, it's very high, but it's similar to like a Scorpion Diablo where we're getting a 3.2. So if my goal is to keep my cost low, then I'm going to get an efficient Andon dehumidifier. I'm going to get an efficient Mitsubishi mini split HLG light. It's just kind of the name of the game.
So that's like I'm not going to say like a cop out, but like if you're just plopping your credit card down, you get 4 Scorpion Diablos, you get a mini split, and you get a bottle of CO2.
Yeah, a 1-ton mini split, and now you can get a 20-pound or a 50-pound bottle. Then you just need on top of that a regulator and a controller. Yeah. So you can get a controller for $150. You can get a regulator for $50. You can get a bottle for, let's say on the high end, 300 filled, 50-pound tank, right? Yeah. So, and then that's only going to cost you $25 a week to refill. So you've got maybe $400 into your CO2 supplementation. Sure. You've got $4,000 into your 4 lights. Okay. You've got $2,000 in the HVAC and dehu, and then maybe a few $100 for your medium and your nutrients at that point.
So, I'm a mind reader. This video will come out in 1 week, and I'm already mind reading the comment section. There are people in the comments section right now screaming, mushroom bags, mushroom bags. Why don't we just use mushroom bags? Have you ever used the mushroom bags?
I have, and I've tested them. Okay. So I have CO2 sensors, the Pulse Pro.
How much do they help?
It depends on how much biomass you have. So here's the thing. If you have 4 seeds in veg that aren't using CO2, it actually boosts and raises these numbers quite impressively. So in a 4x4 tent, 1 Exhale branded CO2 bag, which is the little mycelium bag, I definitely got it above 800 to 900 in a veg tent. Now, in a 4x8, I figured let me get 2 of them since this is 2 4x4s. It's a flower tent. I had 8 3-gallons in there.
With live plants in there and the mushrooms concurrently?
Yeah, 2 bags hanging up above the canopy, 8 plants that had just flipped to flower, right? Brand new bags. So I thought easily going to get 800 to 1,000. Never went above 400 one day.
Okay,
the plants
not to
were
discredit
using faster than it's because my plants were so healthy, the root zones were so vibrant. So to answer your question, they do produce CO2, but if your plants are using that CO2 at a faster
so
rate,
you'd had to probably double up to get it up.
It would be so expensive. It would have been expensive because I would have had to buy.
But to be fair, though, not to be argumentative,
Yes.
but to be fair, wouldn't you have to remove your plants for some period of time to determine the raw CO2 production levels in the absence of plants, right? Because what's happening, the plants are in there, they're sucking it as fast as the mushrooms can make it. So maybe there is a positive benefit. You just couldn't quantify it.
I doubt it because I'll tell you why.
It never got high enough to quantify.
If you exchange air with just the ambient room, you're going to be at 400.
Yeah,
fair enough.
But what I tell you really did work was brewer's yeast.
Where you shake it in the water?
No, so I made it. Yeah, so you shake it. But what I did is I took one of those, you know, the water things for your office, the big 7-gallon.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And I would take sugar, brewer's yeast, and kind of warm it up on the stove and get that sugar to mix in and get that shit reacting.
And then you put a little air tube.
And then you put an air tube in there.
I did that
but
too.
But what you got to do from the air tube to make sure you don't spray the yeast all over your plants is run it into another gallon jug and bubble it. And then come out that way. And then I had one of those.
Brian, that works better.
Really?
I was 657 her ppm.
You never got any kind of infections?
No, well, because I run it into the
you got to
bubbler.
change the bucket. You got to
no
change
yeast infections.
No, well, yeah, a couple times.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that.
I will say this though: those buckets get nasty, and you got to replace them.
So
and
I
stuff,
had it all outside, and then I
that
just
was
ran
smart.
the hose in with
Mine
one
was
of
in the
those.
spare bedroom.
was out of the tent, and I just run one of those. So they laser cut a black tube they sell that rains the CO2 down.
Yeah.
So I put that around
With the
my
little
house.
holes.
It's expensive. It's like $60 a
Okay,
roll.
so I just use the 1/8 tubing that you get at the grocery store or whatever. But I did the same thing, and I got to tell you that. No offense to any of these branded bags, just making your own yeast because you can go at scale and you could put more in there.
Go to a brewery store, dude.
It was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But I will say it's labor intensive. If you want to keep 1,000 CO2, you're going to be in there doing a lot of work.
You're going to have money or time.
So it lasts about 3.5 days of real good reaction, right? So I'd have 2 tanks, but it would take 7 days to stop reacting.
Exactly.
So I would take 2 of them, run them in, and every 3.5 days I'd change out the old one, and this one would be down to its half-life, and this one would be wide open. I mean, it goes in that bubble, it go blah, 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 blah. I mean, it was making.
But for those of you,
it was a perpetual deal.
Yeah.
But for those of you keeping track at home, 3 days, every 3 days, you're going in there and you're doing something to mitigate your CO2 level. Whereas once you buy that tank, controller, and regulator, you just open up the tank, set your controller, and then you wait until that tank runs out. So as far as like, is it worth the 400 up front? For me, yes, every time now. And would I grow without CO2? No.
So
But
for
earlier
me,
we were talking about all walks of life.
Yeah,
it was
for
the
sure.
distance. It was the distance
sure.
to buy. For me, it was the distance to go and get the CO2 tank filled.
Yes.
It was
And the
about
risk back in the
80,
day.
80 miles
Welding.
each direction.
Welding. You're a welder. Still to this day, don't go to the, well, you can go to the grocery store if you want. Go to your local welding
I'm
shop
talking
and
about
get
there's
it
not
refilled.
even a local welding shop where I was living.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I'm saying. It was 80 miles to get CO2, right? That was, So I would just go buy a bunch of brewer's yeast and one of those big giant bags of sugar, and that lasted.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? That's why I can do it, and that's why. It makes sense.
Another thing, go to your local gas station or your favorite fast food, ask to speak with the manager, and then ask them for the contact info of who does their CO2.
Dang, it's fine.
And you'd be
Mine.
you'd be surprised at two of the 5 spots in Michigan. We actually had the big tanks where we'd have the truck come to the driveway, and the guy would come into the building and refill our CO2 tank like a commercial spot at a garage in a backyard, because it was the company was New CO2, NU CO2.
Yeah.
But it was they were the ones who did the Burger Kings in Ypsilanti, and we just happened to get the car to the guy who does the Burger Kings, and he's like, "Yeah, I got you." And he came, brought a massive tank. It was like 6 foot tall, 2 foot, 2 foot. I don't even know what the gallon rating was. I couldn't
I've
move
seen
it. I
those.
couldn't move
They
it.
got a big handle across the top. New CO2. I've seen those.
Yeah.
That would probably be like maybe a
400-pound, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a 50-pound is very small compared to that thing. So
ours is 6 foot diameter, 8 feet tall, and it's a 4,000 pound.
What's
So
that one
that's probably a 500.
What's the one at Flow, you think?
I think that might be, as far as a 4,000, that one might be the same exact one. It comes on an aluminum skid and stuff.
But either way, as far as convenience goes,
5,000.
it doesn't get more convenient than having a damn semi like back up to your driveway and just fill it up for you. I mean, that was the ultimate in CO2.
I think we did a good job covering, like, the 70-year-old guy that's retired. Yeah. That might be his thing. He's retired, man. Yeah. Like, that's part of his
a 5-gallon bucket, a little air tube, some tape. I mean, you could do it for $15-$20 you can get into CO2. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I'd love to see somebody like Jeremy at Build a Soil, and maybe he's done this, I don't know, but like do a cannabis, like one of those big bags, no-till bags, but then he has all lion's mane and all kinds of edible, enough to where it's sustainable, and it's like you can eat the mushrooms and they create the CO2. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I was always so high CO2, 11, 13 with CO2, I my CO2 needs were higher because my Ppfd needs are always higher.
Okay.
So to recap, the most important part here, I would say just because you can run above 1,000 Ppfd doesn't mean you should. Most genetics won't even support it with the right environmental conditions.
Above 1,100?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I will tell you this. If you get yourself a nice indica, like a really fast finishing 55, 60 day, that would be the strain that I personally would play with. Like if you have a tent or a room where you want to go a little harder, maybe push the Ppfd higher, the CO2 higher, the temperature higher, and the EC higher, I would prefer you do it with an indica that's going to finish fast.
That's great advice.
They can take it better.
If you just bought a new grow light, like you have a 5-year-old one and now you finally made the plunge, you bought a Scorpion Diablo or any other brand and you're excited, you got all these seeds, pop some indicas.
Yes.
That way, like, I'm not saying max juice the light, but if you end up wanting to juice the light, you're in a little better shape there.
Yes.
And this is such broad advice.
Right.
Yeah. We, like I said, it would take me 5 hours to give you all the details that are sitting at the tip of my tongue here, but this is just stuff that through experience. Like I summarized my 8 years so quickly in a trailer and a couple lights, but there was a lot that went on with it. There was some failures, some learning curves, some big spending mistakes. There was a lot of things that got us to the confidence that we're at, where we now walk into any room and we can start dissecting it almost like instinctually. Like I don't even mean to. I go in anyone's room and I'm just like, nitrogen toxic over here.
It's that limitless
You got
vision.
the claw going on. Like, and I'm like, your fans, I can guarantee, I'll start flicking a lighter under the canopy and I'm like, you got no airflow. Where's your vein anemometer? Like, there's so many parts to growing that we all have to learn. Like, if you want to really dial in your air, get a vein anemometer, VANE anemometer. $100 tool. Nobody talks about them. It will show you how many meters per second the air movement is going on in your room, and it will show you all your dead spots. It will show you why certain plants never get big and they just look beat up. It will show you why certain plants sweat and get mold and mildew. I would say an apogee meter is very important, but a vein anemometer is actually more important in my opinion. So just little tips like that. If I could leave you guys with anything, check your environment, check your airflow, check your CO2, pay attention to your genetics, and reach out to me, more importantly, if you have any questions. If anything we said here, you want a further description on, if there's anything in your particular case that we didn't mention, WolverineGrown on Instagram, WolverineGrower@gmail.com.
Maybe you can, when the video is released, we'll let you know, and maybe for that first day, you can kind of check in on our YouTube comments, and maybe that way all the information's in one place. It might actually save you some duplicates or something, and I'll hang out in there too.
Yeah, and of course we look forward to having you back soon, and we'll definitely keep
we can do maybe a part 2 to fast lane growing. I mean, there's so much that goes into this.
Oh, absolutely. I think so, and too, eventually, as we get this thing dialed in some more, maybe we'll be able to do, in 3 to 6 months, we'll do a little bit of a live show here or there to where we can answer questions maybe for 15 minutes or 30 minutes and have a live chat. We probably won't do that all the time, but I'd like to do that occasionally. And then I don't think we're ready this episode. Actually, we are. So on other podcasts I've been on, including, like shout out to Do Grows, Heavy T's Grow Show, some other things, we've always kind of give away prize lights and things like that, you know. So I think something we're going to do is I think we should create an email, and we'll call it giveaway@hlg.com. So shoot us your email and register for that to get some promotional stuff from that email, and we'll enter you into a contest to win a new Scorpion Diablo X. And next episode we'll randomize it all, and we'll do a quick pick by just putting numbers in a spreadsheet, and we'll even show the process. Maybe we can screenshot record it, and we'll pick a random winner. So do enter your email to what did I just say?
Giveaway at HLG.com.
We'll be able to find this, no worries. But giveaway at HLG.com will be a new email after this episode is filmed, and so send in your email there, and you'll be entered in.
And if you remember, for the subject, put Scorpion giveaway, just so that later, as we're going through all these, as the weeks go on, we know which they correlated to.
Yeah, and actually you can put in the date that the episode airs as well, or you can actually put the name of the episode, which is episode 2, Life in the Fast Lane. So
cool. That'll
help as well.
Awesome, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for spending 2 hours with us.
It was fun. I'm glad. Like I said, when it comes to these topics, it's like breaking the surface.
I know. It's barely piercing the surface. I know we had a long preamble and stuff, but this would be like an 8-hour show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lifetime show.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a year to get dialed in to where I can even run Scorpion Diablo at 100%, keep up with the nutrition, keep up with the CO2.
And that's if your genetics even allow it. If you get a GMO, you're not running that at 100%.
We had to swap some genetics
under no
out.
scenario. Yeah.
Some genetics we had to just trash them, dude, and get new stuff. So awesome. Good to have you, brother. Steve, good to see you.
Thank you for joining. And
absolutely.
And once again, we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
See you next time.
Uh-huh.